Chapter 114. Guhan, who had obtained 5 heavenly sword skill fragments, calmed down after his initial ecstasy. To be able to obtain 5 token fragments, Guhan felt that it was worth it. Even if the rest were all trash, it was not a big deal. It was unknown if anyone had experienced this before. The more one held on to hope and anticipation, the more excited one was to do something, the more one would end up with the opposite result. If one did not hold on to any hope and acted with an ordinary heart, one would be unexpectedly satisfied. Guhan used an ordinary heart to twist out his 8th twister egg. Thus, Guhan, who was much calmer than before, twisted out a golden twister egg. That was right, it was the most difficult golden twister egg to twist out. Other players would not be able to twist out even one golden twister egg in their entire lives. However, Guhan had twisted out a second one. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels, the Europeans are here. Player military governor has, for the first time, twisted out a golden twister egg during the instance dungeons evaluation round. Truly, comparisons are odious. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels, the Europeans are here. Player military governor has, for the first time, twisted out a golden twister egg during the instance dungeons evaluation round. Truly, comparisons are odious. Ding dong, system prompt, broadcast to all channels, the Europeans are here. Player military governor has, for the first time, twisted out a golden twister egg during the instance dungeons evaluation round. Truly, comparisons are odious. Congratulations to player military governor. You have obtained a golden twister egg. From it, you have obtained a bottle of blue sword essence oral solution. Due to the doubling of the reward, you have obtained 5 bottles of blue sword essence oral solution. 0791's tone became cheerful. Sword essence oral solution, blue, untradeable, unbound. Effect, permanently increase 200 sword essence points after consumption. Usage restriction, no restrictions. It's actually this thing. Guhan was somewhat disappointed when he saw the sword essence oral solution. There were a total of 1000 sword essence points, which was also what a prized sword class sword wielder needed. But to Guhan, who already had 1000 essence sword pills, it was of little value. After consuming these 5 bottles, he was still 8000 points away from becoming a famed sword wielder. It was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. Moreover, Guhan only needed to clear a few more SSS-rated dungeons for the first time with 1000 quarks game sword element. Compared to the precious golden twisted egg, it was like comparing a goose feather to Mount Tai. Why would there be such a thing in the golden egg? Didn't they say that this oral fluid could only be obtained during the swordsmanship tournament of the 8 cities? Guhan asked 0791 unwillingly. Player military governor, the golden egg contains all the items that exist in the game. Even if it is an event-limited item, you can obtain it from the golden egg. 0791 replied formally. Sure enough, the Taoists were right. Things like luck always decline after it reaches its peak. It's like tearing down the east wall to repair the west wall. Since I've already obtained 5 copies of the Heavenly Sword Secret Manual, I can't expect the golden egg to give me anything good. Guhan shook his head and tossed the 5 bottles of Essence Sword oral fluid beside the pile of basic rewards. Then, he pressed on the last chance to twist the egg. Congratulations to player military governor. You've obtained a blue reward. You've obtained a bottle of treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate. Because the reward has been doubled, you've obtained 5 bottles of treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate. Dew of Cherishing Fate, treasure sword grade, tradable, droppable, unbound. Effect, after consumption, the sword mark between the treasure sword grade sword maiden and the sword wielder can be removed. Sword element permanently decreases by 1000 quarks. Usage restriction, no restrictions. It's useless, but it can be sold for tens of thousands of RMB. The Dew of Cherishing Fate was an item that could remove the sword mark between the sword maiden and the sword wielder. Its function was similar to Green Silk Slash, but its value was far lower. Green Silk Slash could perfectly remove all sword marks. After consumption, the sword wielder could synchronize with any sword maiden they wanted without any side effects. However, the Dew of Cherishing Fate was different. It could only remove the sword mark of a sword maiden of a certain level. Moreover, after removing it, the player could only synchronize with a sword maiden of the same level. It was equivalent to switching to a new sword maiden of the same level. Moreover, there was the side effect of permanently decreasing 1000 quarks sword element. Hence, unless one was extremely dissatisfied with their own sword maiden and urgently wanted to switch to a new one, most players would not be interested in consuming the Dew of Cherishing Fate. Although the production rate of the Dew of Cherishing Fate was very low, the usage rate was also very low. The price of the Dew of Cherishing Fate in the auction house had always been maintained between 10,000 to 20,000 renminbi. This was also the price of the treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate. The Dew of Cherishing Fate of Cherishing Fate of Cherishing Fate of Famed Sword and Spirit Sword had already fallen below 10,000 renminbi. Those high-level players did not have the time or desire to find a brand new sword maiden that could synchronize with them successfully. However, the fact that a blue egg could produce a Dew of Cherishing Fate was already extremely lucky. Generally speaking, the main source of the Dew of Cherishing Fate was the purple egg. After twisting the last egg, there were no other rewards left to claim. Guhan tidied up the items in his bosom and placed them into his dimensional pocket. He gave 0791 a heads up and planned to leave the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center. Player Military Governor, you still have unclaimed rewards. Just as Guhan was about to retreat, he suddenly heard 0791 say this. There's still a reward. Guhan was a little confused. He had already claimed the basic reward, the toy egg machine reward, and the dungeon's Easter egg reward. What other reward was there that he had yet to claim? Player Guhan, you have completed the Wudong's Absolute Peakside quest, search for the 3 missing survivors. You will receive a reward that has been upgraded by 1 grade. Guhan recalled that in the Wudong's Absolute Peak dungeon, there were indeed 3 missions to search for missing NPCs. One was Wang Dachui, who wanted to have a good time in the face of death, one was Chen Xiaochue, who wanted to see the sunrise before leaving, and one was the old Taoist who was kicked off the cliff by Guhan. This side quest did indeed have such a reward. What does it mean by a reward that has been upgraded? Guhan asked 0791. It means that among the rewards that you have previously received, you will be able to draw one out and upgrade it by 1 grade. For example, the basic reward of 2 renminbi that you obtained from the basic reward will be upgraded by 1 grade, becoming a basic reward of 10 renminbi. Another example, the normal essence sword pill that you obtained will be upgraded to the refined essence sword pill that increases essence sword by 5 points. Another example, the treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate that you obtained from the toy egg will be upgraded to the famed sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate. Wow, this reward is awesome. Guhan exclaimed in admiration and continued to ask, can this upgrade be stacked with the 5 times increase from the ancestral Easter egg and the 100 times increase from the first dungeon's SSS grade evaluation? Of course, all the reward upgrades will be stacked together. Please rest assured. 0791's confirmation made Guhan burst with joy. The system was too kind. He never would have thought that there would be such a good thing. If this reward was used on the essence sword pill, then wouldn't his essence sword that increased by 1000 quarks directly jump to 5000 quarks? In addition to the 1000 quarks from the essence sword oral solution, he would be more than halfway to the famed sword grade. Can I choose which reward I want to upgrade? Gu Han continued to push his luck. No, the system will randomly draw a reward to be upgraded. Player Military Governor is unable to choose on his own. Oh. Guhan made an O sound and did not think too much about it. Even if he did not upgrade it to the essence sword pill, it could be upgraded to RMB, sword Scardust, or other rewards. In short, there would be no harm in upgrading a reward by 1 level. Player Military Governor, would you like to upgrade a reward by 1 level? 0791 asked for a final confirmation. Yes. Guhan confirmed. The system has started a random selection. The results will be announced in 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When 0791 was counting down, Guhan finally had time to calm down and think about what had just happened. However, After thinking about it carefully, he realized that something was not right. It seemed that something like upgrading a reward by one level might not be completely without harm. If it was that thing that was upgraded, then he would have really suffered a huge loss. After understanding this, Guhan shuddered and immediately changed his words. He shouted to 0791, "I don't want it anymore. I don't want this upgrade reward anymore. If you want to cancel it, I want to cancel it." 0791 finished the countdown and revealed his bright teeth and smile. "You have confirmed it, player military governor." Chapter 115. Player military governor, your reward level has been upgraded. The reward has been upgraded to Treasure Sword Grade Heavenly Sword Secret Manuals. The reward after upgrade is Famous Sword Grade Juicy Sword Mechanical Birds. I wish you a happy game. Things had indeed developed in the worst possible direction. Just as Ji Han was thinking about whether this reward would be used on the secret manual of the Heaven Reliant Sword, 0791 notified him that it had already been used up. The secret manual of the Heaven Reliant Sword had become the mechanical bird of the Juicy Sword. This was the legendary saying of heaven and hell with a single thought. Some people didn't understand. Raising the Sword Maiden's keepsake from the Treasure Sword grade to the Famed Sword grade? You've made a huge profit. Although you won't be able to use it for a while, you can use it when you collect Famed Swords in the future. Famed Swords are definitely worth more than Treasure Swords, right? This was a big mistake. How could a famous sword record ranked in the hundreds compare to the Treasure Sword record's number 1? The simplest example was Mingyue's Sunset Sword. A set of tokens was sold at the auction house for 3 million. This Sunset Sword was even ranked in the top 100 famous swords. But a set of Heavenly Sword? You couldn't buy it even if you wanted to. That was why when Ji Han heard that his Heavenly Sword had been replaced by the Juicy Sword, a famous sword that he had never heard of before. Perhaps it was a famous sword that was ranked in the hundreds, he almost went to file a complaint to 0791. Wait, no, I've never heard of the Juicy Sword before. Guhan desperately searched his memory, but no matter what, he couldn't find any information related to the Juicy Sword. Even the Qingpin Sword, Guhan had seen a few players mention it in the forum. This was the Juicy Sword, but it was a completely unfamiliar name. Guhan was at least sure that the Juicy Sword was not among the 1024 famous swords in the famous sword record. This was a little interesting. Why would such a sword suddenly appear in Sword Maiden Online? What was the origin of this Juicy Sword? Guhan wanted to ask 0791 about the origin of this Juicy Sword, but when he raised his head, he found that the sofa opposite him was already empty. 0791 was nowhere to be seen. System notification. Player military governor, your settlement has ended. You will leave the settlement center in 30 seconds. You are welcome to come down again. After exiting the settlement center, Guhan returned to his sword tomb. Although he hadn't logged in for almost 3 days, the simple house was still spotless. Wasn't this obvious? How could the game world be covered in dust? With the Juicy Sword in mind, Guhan landed and went straight to the computer in the sword tomb. He began searching for information related to the Juicy Sword on the internet. Although this was a computer in a game, its actual functions were no different from a computer in reality. You could even use the computer in the world of Sword Maiden Online to play League of Legends. This game from more than 1,000 years ago was still popular even now. Ji Han sat in front of the computer for 3 hours and searched through millions of words of information. He couldn't say that there was none, but it was extremely limited. First of all, if he used Juicy Sword as a keyword search, Ji Han did not find any information. Even if he found a hacker in the group and asked him to use his own special search tool, he did not find anything. His search tool was able to break through the seal set by the council as an S-class secret and read the confidential information. Since this software could not be found, it meant that either there was no information about the Juicy Sword on the internet, or the Juicy Sword's confidentiality level was above SS. No matter which answer it was something that Guhan could not deal with at the moment. Thus, Guhan took a step back and used Juicy as a keyword to search for information. This time, Guhan finally found something. Juzi, also known as Juzi or Juzi, is the title given to the leader of the school of Moism in the 100 schools of thought. Those who are able to become Juzi are all top-notch masters who are highly skilled in martial arts, have profound wisdom, and are proficient in the school of Moism. The 100 schools of thought had appeared during the transition between the primordial era and the medieval era. Legend had it that every single one of the 100 schools of thought had the ability to turn the world upside down and transcend the mortal world. However, in the near-ancient era, the strength of the 100 schools of thought had gradually declined, and in the end, they were no different from ordinary people. In the Middle Ages, the first Juzi was the founder of the school of Moism, Mo-Di, also known as Mozi. Among the 100 schools of thought, the school of Moism was the most tightly organized, and its actions were the most systematic. When it entered the imperial court, it was a powerful school that could do whatever it wanted. At the same time, the school of Moism also had strong hands-on abilities. Legend had it that in the Middle Ages, they were able to create wooden oxen that ran on the ground, wooden birds that flew in the sky, and wooden whales that swam in the water. Almost all of the disciples of the school of Moism were outstanding carpenters and inventors. If the school of Moism hadn't declined during the end of the Qin dynasty and the beginning of the Han dynasty, and then been crushed and vilified by the Confucians until they disappeared, perhaps during the Middle Ages, China would have been able to enter the steam era before Europe. There were rumors that after the school of Moism's influence in the light was destroyed by the Confucians, they moved into the shadows and changed their name, becoming a martial arts sect in the pugilistic world, the Demon Sect. The strength of the Demon Sect was sometimes strong, and sometimes weak. When it was strong, it could sweep through the world, giving birth to unparalleled heroes like Wu Zetian and Zhu Yuanzhong. When it was weak, it could also cause chaos in the world, like Xu Wen and the White Lotus Society. However, all the emperors that used the Demon Sect to ascend to the supreme throne would all turn around and kill the Demon Sect without exception. I don't know if they were afraid that after they died, their descendants wouldn't be able to control this organization. All in all, the school of Moism was powerful, and Juzi's status was supreme. Then, what about the Juzi sword? Could this Juzi sword be the sword of the school of Moism's Juzi? If it was, how strong was this sword? How was it compared to King Yu? Guhan thought about these questions, but he didn't have enough information. There was no evidence or battle records that could be used to deduce the Juzi sword's strength. Thinking of King Yu, Guhan realized that this lady was still in the scabbard and hadn't been released by him. Guhan opened the sword lady's stats interface. King Yu's data was still red, and the 1% durability didn't change at all. Guhan frowned. Under normal circumstances, after returning to the scabbard to rest for a while, the sword lady should have recovered from 1% durability to full. However, 3 days passed and King Yu's situation didn't change at all. This meant that under Zunaida's dragon flame attack, King Yu had injured his foundation to the point that he couldn't rely on the scabbard to recover. He had to find a sword blacksmith to recover. As the name suggested, sword blacksmith was a job that forged sword ladies. Together with sword wielder, they were the only 2 jobs in Sword Lady Online. However, there weren't many players who played sword blacksmith because sword blacksmiths couldn't enjoy exciting battles, nor could they have sword ladies with the same sword marks. That was why sword blacksmiths were very rare in Sword Lady Online. Powerful sword blacksmiths were even rarer. However, powerful sword blacksmiths were even more respected than sword wielder of the same level. For example, a famed sword blacksmith would definitely be much more popular than a famed sword wielder, and would be worth a lot more as well. A famed sword-level swordsmith could earn the same amount of money that a famed sword-level swordsman could earn in a few months in a single day. It was the same in reality. Or rather, sword blacksmiths in reality were rarer and more precious than sword blacksmiths in the game. This was because there were more than 200,000 sword wielder in the world, and more than 200,000 artificial sword ladies in their hands were created by these sword blacksmiths. Without sword blacksmiths forging artificial sword ladies, humans might not have been able to hold out during the Alps War and fall to Yuan Ku's wave after wave of attacks. In Yuzhang City, there was a street called Sword Dragon Spring Road. Whether famous or not, swordsmiths in Yuzhang City would set up shops or stalls on this street to sell the artificial sword maidens they had forged. Guhan was currently strolling along Longquan Street. On both sides of the street were standard shops that were about 20 square meters in size. These shops were opened by slightly famous sword blacksmiths. As the rent for these shops was not cheap, it was impossible for them to afford renting these shops if they could not create good sword ladies and sell them for a good price. Outside the shop, there was a row of small stalls, and on the stalls were some artificial sword maidens. The quality and workmanship of the sword maidens gave off a very bad feeling. The owners of these stalls were basically new sword blacksmiths. A small number of them were old sword blacksmiths who had no talent and could not forge good sword ladies. They could not afford to rent shops, so they could only set up stalls on both sides of the street and sell their artificial sword ladies to sword wielder who did not have much money, or if they were lucky, they could trick a fool. Ji Han looked like a rich man. Ji Han, who only had the Yu King's sword on his back, looked like a new sword wielder who was preparing to buy a treasured sword-grade man-made sword mistress. Guhan did not bring Qingpin's sword with him because Qingpin was sleeping in the real world. Outside his medical pod, Guhan did not bring Qingpin into the game. Moreover, Qingpin could not transform into a sword lady in the game. After being mute for a few hours in the Wudong Peak dungeon, Qingpin was clearly not interested in entering the game. Young hero, come and take a look at my sword maiden. It's a treasured sword with more than 90% homogeneity. There's also a treasured sword Roland's sword from Britain. They're all top-notch man-made swords. Young hero, take a look. Ji Han glanced at the artificial sword maiden that the swordsmith said had a 90% homogeneity. If the sword maiden's appearance was more than 65% homogeneity, Ji Han would have changed his surname to him. Along the way, he got rid of countless sword blacksmiths who were bragging about themselves. Guhan's sharp eyes never found the person he was looking for. Guhan had come to Dragon Spring Street to repair his sword lady, the Yu King. However, sword blacksmiths who could repair famous swords were basically all in the shops on the street. If he went to them, it would easily cost tens of thousands of RMB, not including the repair materials. With Guhan's current financial situation, unless he sold cornucopia, he would not be able to hire a famous sword blacksmith. Therefore, Guhan could only pick up scraps from the sword blacksmiths who had set up stalls on both sides of the street. According to his experience on the forum, there would always be a few unlucky sword blacksmiths who had extraordinary strength but bad luck. Among these new sword blacksmiths, one needed a pair of sharp eyes to find a sword blacksmith like him. Chapter 116. Guhan stopped in front of a stall. This stall looked much more miserable than the other stalls outside. At the very least, the other stalls had a table covered with a red cloth, and various man-made swords were placed on the red cloth. However, this stall directly threw several man-made swords on the ground. It was not even willing to put a piece of cloth on the ground. With such a lazy attitude and the terrible appearance of these man-made swords, this stall was rarely visited. As the stall's owner, the swordsmith was lazily leaning against a rock. It was unknown whether he had fallen asleep or not. The reason why Ji Han stopped in front of this stall with no future was because he discovered that among these man-made swords that looked terrible, there was unexpectedly a famed sword that was of high quality. Although the appearance of this high-quality sword was much worse than the other man-made swords. Sword wielders who were familiar with man-made sword ladies knew that there was only one standard to determine whether a man-made sword lady was good or bad: homogeneity. Homogeneity referred to the similarity between the man-made sword lady's data on paper and the imitation sword lady's data on paper. The closer the homogeneity was to 100%, the stronger the man-made sword lady was, and the higher its value. Generally speaking, there were 3 ways to determine homogeneity. The simplest way was to look at the similarity in appearance. You could directly compare the appearance of the man-made sword lady with the appearance of the natural sword lady. The more similar they looked, the higher the homogeneity. However, the accuracy of this method was not very reliable. It was only suitable for about 60% of man-made sword ladies. There would always be some sword ladies that looked worlds apart, but were shockingly homogeneity. A slightly more complicated method was to look at the patterns on the sword's blade. Based on the differences in the patterns, the similarity could be determined. The accuracy of this method was very high. About 90% of man-made sword ladies were suitable for this method. However, it required a lot of experience to make a judgment. This was because the patterns on a sword lady were too complicated and there were too many of them. Just like fingerprints, every man-made sword lady had different patterns. There was no unified standard to judge these patterns. One could only rely on sufficient experience to make a judgment. Ordinary sword wielders would definitely not be able to tell how much homogeneity there was from the patterns. The most complicated and accurate method was the lick method. As the name suggested, it was to use one's tongue to lick the sword's blade. According to the writings of Cheng Jianjun, the first human grandmaster appraiser, the man-made sword Maiden's blade was divided into 18 major smells, 72 minor smells, 564 minor smells, and 2,333 minor smells. According to the differences in these smells, one could accurately determine the degree of homogeneity of the man-made sword Maiden. According to historical records, Cheng Jianjun only needed to lick the tip of the sword and he would be able to tell the degree of homogeneity of the man-made sword Maiden. His accuracy was as high as 100%, and he had never made a mistake in his life. He was revered as the first appraisal grandmaster in human history. Before Cheng Jianjun, the title of an appraiser had stopped at the level of a grandmaster appraiser. Later on, people felt that comparing Cheng Jianjun with other grandmasters was an insult to Cheng Jianjun. Hence, a new title of grandmaster appraiser was created for Cheng Jianjun. After Cheng Jianjun, no one else could reach his level. Naturally, there was no second appraiser. Although Guhan was a genius, he had no interest in studying the lick method. He had only studied the patterns for a while when he was bored. Although he wasn't very proficient, it wasn't a problem for him to understand it. Guhan realized that the man-made sword lady that looked terrible had very beautiful patterns. They were even more beautiful than the 80% of the man-made sword ladies Guhan had seen. Guhan determined that there was a 90% chance that the man-made sword lady's homogeneity was above 90%. If a sword blacksmith could forge a famed sword lady with more than 90% homogeneity, he would be qualified to do business in the shops on both sides of the border. Although Guhan didn't know why he was reduced to setting up a stall outside, he was certain that he had found a loophole. There was hope for repairing the Yu King sword. "Stop, don't touch her." Just as Guhan was about to pick up the sword to take a closer look, a lazy voice stopped Guhan. "Newbie, you might not know the rules of Dragon Spring Street. You can only look at the swords here and not touch them. Once you touch them, you have to buy them back." Dragon Spring Street did have such a rule. As long as the sword lady and the sword wielder touched each other, there was a certain chance of synchronization. This was especially so for man-made sword ladies. Their chances of synchronization were much higher than natural sword ladies. Many shameless sword bearers didn't say that they wanted to buy it and just touched it, causing the synchronization to succeed. Once the synchronization was successful, the man-made sword would become the sword bearer's person. The swordsmith wouldn't even have a way to take it back. It was fine if the sword bearer was willing to pay. Some very bored sword bearers would say things like, "This sword is fated with me, so it should belong to me. This sword took a fancy to me, not me. This sword is too trashy, I don't want it, hurry up and give me a bottle of dew of cherishing fate and let me erase the sword scars," using it to renege on the debt or lower the price. This caused the strong dissatisfaction of the majority of the swordsmiths, and there were several strikes and demonstrations. Over time, the sword committee issued a rule. When buying man-made swords, buyers were only allowed to look and not touch them. If they touched it, they had to buy it. Even if the synchronization was not successful, they had to buy it. Otherwise, they would be arrested by the law enforcement team and sent to the beacon tower to be on duty for a year to 10 years. "Master, this sword has a very high degree of homogeneity. I think it's at least 95%. Guhan deliberately said that it was more than 90%. "Kid, I couldn't tell, but you have good taste. Are you an appraiser?" As expected, the stall owner was overjoyed by Guhan's words. His entire face was full of smiles. "But your skill is still lacking." The exceptional sword appraiser, Master Sun, said that this sword is at most 91% homogeneity. It's still far from 95%. The exceptional sword was a shop opened by the Swordsmiths Alliance. It was also the largest shop on Longquan Street. There were both skilled swordsmiths and appraisers with extraordinary eyesight working there. The appraisal result of the exceptional sword appraiser was no more than a 3% difference. The credibility of the appraisal was very high. Since Master has such ability, why would you set up a stall outside? You'll be treated as a noble in any shop. Why do you have to endure the wind and rain here? Kid, don't tell me you're a spy from some shop, trying to poach me. The stall owner frowned. Sooner or later, I, Gongsun Ji, will take back my shop. Don't worry, don't have any designs on me. No, Master, you've misunderstood. I'm just asking for your help. Guhan waved his hand. He took out the damaged King Yu sword from his back and placed it in front of Gongsun Ji. King Yu Gojian sword. Gongsun Ji's eyes lit up. The entire sword was hidden in the scabbard, with only a small part of the hilt exposed. However, Gongsun Ji was able to recognize King Yu at a glance. From this, it could be seen that Gongsun Ji's skill was extraordinary. Whoosh! Gongsun Ji quickly pulled out the King of Yu's Gojian sword. The originally bronze blade was now charred black, and there were even some faint cracks on the blade. The two sides of the blade were also curled up. It was a terrible sight to behold. It's actually damaged to this extent. Kid, what kind of Yuan coup did you fight with? Gongsun Ji asked Guhan in disbelief. It's nothing, just a obsidian dragon. What, you wastrel, you actually used a famed sword to fight a nether-level obsidian dragon? No wonder you're so bad. You're just a famed swordsman, how can you be so arrogant? You brats, you really don't know how to take care of your sword mistress anymore. Gongsun Ji criticized Guhan bitterly. If Gongsun Ji knew that Guhan did not fight a spiritual sword-level obsidian dragon, but an immortal sword-level obsidian dragon king, he would definitely stab Guhan to death in anger. It was just an accident. Guhan shrugged. Master Gongsun, can you fix this sword? Yes. Gongsun Ji nodded. But I need time. Man-made King Yu Gojian swords are very rare. Not many swordsmiths can forge them. I have to go back and search for materials to repair it before I can start. Come find me the day after tomorrow, and I'll give you an undamaged man-made King Yu Gojian sword. Man-made? Guhan smiled. Master Gongsun, you'd better look carefully. How can my eyes be wrong? You think this is natural? Gongsun Ji stopped talking. His wrist was shaking. Even though he said it was disdainful, he still took a few more glances. It was because of these glances that he lost control of his wrist. This really is a natural King Yu Gojian sword. Gongsun Ji trembled. The natural King Yu Gojian sword hasn't appeared in the game for 40 years. Even my master hasn't seen it. I can't believe I'll be able to see the natural King Yu Gojian sword with my own eyes and touch it with my own hand. For some reason, Sword Maiden Online hadn't dropped a token of the King Yu Gojian sword for 40 years. Therefore, no one had seen what the natural King Yu Gojian sword looked like in the past 40 years. Kid, I don't know what kind of luck you had to obtain the King Yu Gojian sword. But since it's natural, it'll be even more complicated to repair. Gongsun Ji hesitated. I'm afraid I can't give it to you the day after tomorrow. It'll take at least a week. No problem, I can wait. Guhan nodded. Natural sword maidens, especially rare ones like the King Yu Gojian sword, were extremely troublesome to repair. A week was already considered fast. How much will it cost to repair? Guhan asked again. He even added, if it's too expensive, I'll go find a better sword. After all, I'll be more at ease if it's a big company. 5,000. Other than the materials, I'll charge 5,000 for the repair. Gongsun Ji clenched his teeth. If it was a better sword, 5,000 RMB wouldn't even be enough to repair an ancient sword. Gongsun Ji's price couldn't be any lower. This was because repairing a natural sword maiden, especially one like the King Yu Gojian sword, was something many blacksmiths dreamed of. Therefore, Gongsun Ji lowered the repair fee to the lowest possible price. All right, deal. There was nothing to hesitate about. Also, you have to pay half of the repair fee in advance. Gongsun Ji suddenly added. I'm afraid that's not the rule of Longquan Street. Guhan's expression changed. Isn't the rule of Longquan Street that we don't charge anything before it's repaired? Hearing Guhan's words, Gong Sunji's face changed colors. Finally, he said dejectedly, the materials needed to repair the King Yu Gojian sword are at least 50,000 RMB. I only have less than 30,000 RMB now. You have to give me at least 20,000 RMB first. Otherwise, I really can't do anything. 20,000. Guhan's heart skipped a beat. He only has about 1,000 RMB left from the dungeon. Where can he find 20,000 RMB for Gong Sunji? Chapter 117. Should I go to another company? They definitely don't need me to pay in advance. Guhan gave up on the idea as soon as it popped into his head. If he went to a big company like Peerless Sword, he wouldn't need to pay in advance, but he definitely wouldn't be like Gong Sunji, who only charged him 5,000 renminbi. They would charge him 10 times that amount, and charging him 50,000 renminbi was already a very generous price. Guhan thought about it for a while, then asked Gong Sunji to wait for him. He then opened up the auction house's interface. He planned to sell the 5 bottles of treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate that he had obtained from the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center, as well as the white iron sword keepsake that was worth 10,000 renminbi. He clicked on the auction house's interface, and the first thing that appeared was an advertisement on the front page of the auction house. It said that in 5 days, the 198th Super Universe Live auction would be held. There would be many very precious and valuable super game items that would be participating in this auction, and all players were invited to participate. Guhan directly ignored this advertisement and searched for treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate. A long list of treasure sword grade Dew of Cherishing Fate appeared, and the price was basically around 6,000 renminbi per bottle. It seemed that the price had dropped quite a bit recently. Looking at the price of the white iron sword keepsake, it was even more tragic. A single white iron sword keepsake could not even be sold for 500 renminbi, and all of them were sold for 499 renminbi. Guhan was in urgent need of money, so he didn't bother planning out the best price. He directly set the price of the Dew of Cherishing Fate at 5,500 renminbi per bottle, and the white iron sword keepsake at 450 renminbi per bottle, which was about 10% cheaper than the current lowest price. As expected, in less than 5 minutes, these items were all bought at the fixed price. After deducting the 10% transaction tax, Guhan received around 27,000 renminbi. After paying Gong Sunji 20,000 renminbi, he only had around 7,000 renminbi left. After adding Gong Sunji's contact number and giving him the Yu Wangjian, Guhan silently left Longquan Street. Guhan was not worried that Gong Sunji would swallow his sword Maiden, because he had already synchronized the sword Maiden. Even if he swallowed it, he would not be able to use it, let alone sell it. It would be meaningless. Gong Sunji glanced at the military governor's name on his contact list. It sounded familiar, but he didn't think too much about it. He focused all his attention on repairing the Yu King sword. Should I consider doing dungeons that are easier to earn money from? Thinking about the 35,000 yuan he had to pay Gong Sunji in a week and the 10 million yuan he owed the hospital and Liuonian Ling, Guhan felt a headache coming on. Since he already had more than 2,000 Quark's game sword essence, he should not be lacking in sword essence for the time being. Spending some time to earn some money and redeem his debt as soon as possible should be a good choice. Thinking of sword element, Guhan's more than 1,000 sword element pills and 5 bottles of sword element oral solution had not been drunk yet. Guhan was not a person who liked to procrastinate. He first took out 5 bottles of sword element oral solution from his dimensional pocket and gulped them down one by one. He then poured the essence sword pills into his mouth and swallowed them all. In less than 3 minutes, all of these pills had entered Ji Yuhan's stomach. He looked at his attribute panel again. As expected, his essence sword had increased to 2,509 points. In the game, Ji Yuhan had become a sword wielder at the level of a treasured sword. Burp. Guhan burped. He had eaten so many sword element pills in one go. It was almost enough to cover his lunch expenses. As if to match Guhan's burp, his communication device rang. There were not many names in Guhan's contact list in the game. It was just Gong Sun Ji, who had just been added, and everyone in Song Hammer's small party. The caller was Bright Moon of the Past. Military Governor, are you free now? Bright Moon of the Past did not beat around the bush. I'm free. All right, I'm at KFC Hotel now. It's the same private room as last time. Hurry over. Is it about the interview? Guhan remembered that he had agreed to an exclusive interview with a good friend of Bright Moon's for 30,000 renminbi a few days ago. He guessed that Bright Moon of the Past had contacted him for this. That's right. My friend is right next to me now. Hurry over. I'll treat you to a meal. After eating, we'll go straight to the interview. Bright Moon of the Past's tone was very urgent. All right, I'll go now. Guhan, who had always regarded money as dirt, suddenly developed a strong interest in RMB. It was better to get 30,000 renminbi in his pocket as soon as possible. Guhan hung up and was about to head to KFC Hotel. However, just as he put down his communication device, it rang again. What was it? Guhan turned on his communication device again. This time, it was a notification. Dear player Military Governor, someone in the game has read a paid post posted by your account, Military Governor 12580, in the forum. I am Military Governor. I will personally explain how to get an SSS rating. Paid 5 renminbi. After deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 4 renminbi has been automatically transferred into your game account. Finally, someone was willing to pay for my post. Guhan was instantly moved. But very quickly, something happened that made Guhan even more moved. Another notification came. Dear player Military Governor, someone in the game has read a paid post posted by your account, Military Governor 12580, in the forum. I am Military Governor. I will personally explain how to get an SSS rating. I think it's very good. I have tipped you 588 renminbi. After deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 470. 4 renminbi has been automatically transferred into your game account. This moved Guhan. He actually tipped me 588 renminbi. What a great act. Guhan felt the need to do something to thank this generous reader. Guhan didn't leave. He opened the forum and found the post posted by his account. When he opened it, there was only one reply. Nonsense. There was only one paid record. Of course, there was only one reply. The reply read, originally, I clicked on this post with the intention of scolding the original poster. In the end, I discovered that the original poster is really a godly person. It's simply 666666. Please accept my knees. 588 renminbi for you. May I ask if you are really Military Governor himself? Guhan looked at the ID of the reply. It was called Real Constant Country. Thus, Gu Han opened up his communication device, clicked on the friend add interface, and entered the name of True Times Constant Ruo Nation. In the attached message, he wrote, I am the commander himself, thank you for your support. The other party has set it to reject strangers from adding. Your request has been rejected. Guhan was instantly embarrassed. Guhan, who originally thought that he would be instantly added, actually encountered such a result. This was probably an eye for an eye. Countless people who wanted to add Guhan as a friend received the same system prompt. Sister Mingyu, will that Military Governor really come? In the KFC Hotel's private room, a cute, round-faced girl who looked like Ari Fukuhara was anxiously asking Mingyu of the past. In this regard, Mingyu of the past patted her chest and guaranteed, no one has ever dared to stand me up. The subsequent knock on the door confirmed Mingyu's bold words. But when Mingyu of the past put her arm around Guhan's shoulder and introduced him to this girl who looked like Ari Fukuhara, the other party was obviously startled. She was startled by the 4 scars on Guhan's face. Girls can't stand this. Just now on Ryukan Street, none of the men cared about Guhan's face. Hello, my name is Kigo Fukuhara. I am the reporter and editor of Invincible Swordsman. Nice to meet you, Mr. Military Governor. Kigo Fukuhara extended her hand. Hello, I am Military Governor. Nice to meet you, Miss Kigo Fukuhara. Guhan very considerately flashed his name above his head to show that he was indeed called military governor. Then, he squeezed the other party's hand for a bit before letting go. I didn't think that I could really meet you, Mr. Military Governor. Do you know that there are a lot of comments about you on the internet? Kigo Fukuhara summoned up her courage and asked the first question. Sorry. Guhan waved his hand. Mingyu said to treat me to a meal first. I am very hungry now. Wait for me to finish eating, then we will start the interview. With that, without waiting for Kigo Fukuhara's consent, he directly sat on the chair and began to eat the food on the table. Kigo Fukuhara was choked by Guhan, awkwardly stood there, not knowing what to say. Hey, military governor, you have such an attitude towards a little girl, you don't have any gentlemanly demeanor. That year, Mingyu gracefully sat beside Guhan, watching him eat while complaining that he didn't have gentlemanly demeanor. Do you know what it means to be a gentleman before the apocalypse? Guhan ate an abalone and rolled his eyes at that year's Mingyu. I came here just because you invited me to a meal. The interview is just on the way. Really? Hearing Guhan's words, Mingyu smiled so much that her eyes were curved. And that 30,000 RMB, Guhan spoiled the mood, and then said to Kigo Fukuhara, who was standing there awkwardly, Miss Fukuhara, take this opportunity to transfer that 30,000 RMB to me. Chapter 118. The editor-in-chief of Invincible Swordsman, Tiger Loves Cat, had been having a hard time for the past 2 years. The sales of his magazine had been declining for 2 consecutive years. In the past, it would sell more than 100,000 copies per issue, but now it had dropped to less than 30,000 copies. The profit was already in the negatives. Just now, the finance department had come to tell him that the money in the account was not enough to pay the next month's salary. Along with the physical magazine, the number of clicks on the website of Invincible Swordsman continued to plummet. The interview that was recommended on the cover of the front page did not even have 100,000 clicks after a week. On the website of Swordbearer's Story Club, a random recommendation spot had 500,000 clicks, okay? To make matters worse, the chairman had come to talk to him yesterday. On the surface, he had comforted him, saying that he was not to blame for the low sales, it was the reader's tastes that had changed. Then, with a sad face, he had informed him that the board of directors had completed the negotiations with the Yaoguang Sword Group. Invincible Swordsman had been sold to the Yaoguang Sword Group. Next month, the people from the Yaoguang Sword Group would return to take over the editorial department of Invincible Swordsman. By then, the future of Tiger Loves Cat would depend on the arrangements of the Yaoguang Sword Group. Tiger Loves Cat was already in his 50s. He could no longer withstand the ups and downs of time. All he could think about now was how to continue to be the editor-in-chief of Invincible Swordsman until he retired. If he wanted to maintain his position, then he had to produce enough results in a short period of time to convince the higher-ups of the Yaoguang Sword Group to let him stay. Hence, under Tigress Loves Cat's instructions, all the reporters and editors were forcefully sent out to find some big news, some eye-catching news that could rapidly increase the sales and attention of Invincible Swordsman. These reporters and editors also found out about the news of the Yaoguang Sword Group. Since they did not want to be kicked out, they were much more efficient than usual. In just half a month, more than 300 news articles were sent to Tiger Loves Cat's desk. Tiger Loves Cat glanced at them and threw them all into the trash bin. Yuzhang City's Gold Phoenix community hosts a resident soccer match. 2 ancient sword wielders show up to cheer. Urban legend: will the sword wielder brush his teeth or not? Pork prices rise. What dirty deals are involved? Wet for more than 20 days, finally dry. The first Leihaha Cup milking cup has ended. What kind of damned news was this? Tiger Loves Cat finally understood why her magazine's sales were so low. It was all the fault of these idiotic reporters and editors. The annoyed Tiger Loves Cat's communicator suddenly rang. He took a look and saw that it was a new reporter from a magazine called Kigo Fukuhara. This person, who had been shoved in by the chairman last month because of his connections, hadn't even submitted a decent manuscript in the past month. Originally, on account of the chairman's backing, this kind of person was fine. The editorial department did not lack someone like her. But the problem was, The chairman had already sold the magazine, and this little girl's backing was gone. Tiger Loves Cat secretly decided to fire Kigo Fukuhara at the end of this month. This way, she could cut out the unnecessary people and also show her loyalty to Yaoguang Group. Look, I pulled out the nail that the former chairman left in the editing department for you. I'm Seong Yaoguang with a heart of gold. Hello, Kigo, it's me. I am Tiger Loves Cat. What's the matter? Although she had decided to fire Kigo Fukuhara, now was not the time. She must wait until next month, when Yaoguang Group starts to take over the editorial department. She must fire her in front of the people who came to take over the editorial department. If not, who would see her loyalty? Chief Editor, can you transfer the 30,000 renminbi you mentioned in the last meeting to me now? I need it urgently. Kigo Fukuhara's voice was urgent and nervous. Fuck, I can't even pay my salary now. How can I transfer 30,000 renminbi to this stupid newbie who was about to be fired? Am I stupid? Why would this Kigo Fukuhara want 30,000 renminbi? When did I mention 30,000 renminbi in the meeting? Wait, it seems like I really did say this. A few days ago, during the morning meeting, I seemed to have announced that I was willing to fork out 30,000 renminbi to buy an exclusive interview with the recently exploding player commander on the forum. Could it be that this silly girl was planning to interview the commander? This silly child, could it be that she was cheated by a scammer? Hey, Kigo, let me tell you, there are a lot of scammers in the game. They say that they know Spirit Sword rank, Immortal Sword rank swordbearers, that they know Bat's super secret, or that they have some SSS level strategy for Revenge of Alps. They are all scammers. You must not believe them. Tiger Loves Cat decided to save this silly girl's IQ. No, Chief Editor, he is not a scammer. I have now met Military Governor, he is beside me. Hey, Kigo, you are still young, too young. Nowadays, scammers have their own specialties. Their deception is very brilliant. Let me tell you. Tiger Loves Cat was preparing to give a long lecture to this young newbie when he received a video file. The notification was sent by Kigo Fukuhara. When he opened it, it was a video of a young man with 4 scars on his face shaking hands with Kigo Fukuhara. On this man's head, the 2 words Military Governor were clearly visible. That's right, this person's game name is Military Governor. Tiger Loves Cat repeatedly confirmed the name on the video. There was no spacebar or hidden symbol that scammers often use. This player's name was indeed Military Governor. Miss Kigo, please be sure to maintain good communication with the other party. The editorial department will immediately transfer 30,000 renminbi to you. After Tiger Loves Cat hung up the call with Kigo Fukuhara, he was so excited that he was about to go crazy. He punched the sky and then fiercely pounded the ground. After completely venting out the excitement of coming back from the dead, he immediately called money. Little Who, I ask you, how much cash do we have in our account? More than 60,000. Very good, you immediately transfer 30,000 to Kigo Fukuhara's account. Yes, it's that newbie reporter. I did not go crazy, nor was I cheated. This is related to the future of our magazine. I now order you to immediately transfer the money to her. If you don't want to transfer, then get the hell out of here. After confirming that money had transferred the money to Kigo Fukuhara, Tiger Loves Cat took the initiative to call Kigo Fukuhara and asked in a very gentle and kind manner. Kigo Fukuhara, did you receive the money from the company? Mr. Military Governor, did he agree to our interview? He agreed. That's great. Hearing Kigo Fukuhara say that the military governor agreed, Tiger Loves Cat excitedly bit the pen in his hand. Kigo Fukuhara. Listen to me, you are a newbie, you may not be familiar with interviews. But it doesn't matter. During the interview, you can turn on the live broadcast. I will remotely observe from the office and guide you during the interview. 10 minutes later, Kigo Fukuhara's video invitation arrived. Tiger Loves Cat projected the video to the largest size in the air and began to remotely synchronize the interview. On the screen, the scar-faced player with the military governor's name was sitting opposite the cameraman, Kigo Fukuhara. The interview officially began. Calm down, Kigo Fukuhara, don't be nervous. You first ask Mr. Military Governor to introduce himself. Tiger Loves Cat noticed that the screen was slightly shaking, which meant that Kigo Fukuhara, as the cameraman, was trembling nervously. Dear player Mr. Military Governor, can you first say hello to our Invincible Swordsman audience and introduce yourself? Kigo Fukuhara used the most commonly used interview question to start the interview. Hello everyone Invincible Swordsman audience, I am the player Military Governor of Sword Maiden Online. I am very happy to meet everyone through Invincible Swordsman magazine. Guhan's answer was also very accurate. Below, H stands for Kigo Fukuhara, T stands for Military Governor. H. Mr. Military Governor, I first want to formally confirm with you, are you really the player who cleared the SSS class Yu Wang Go Jian Jian and the first player who found the Wudong Peak main storyline Easter egg? Sorry, although I have seen your name, I still can't believe that I can sit in front of you. T. It's okay. I think this title can prove that I'm the SSS grade Military Governor. After Guhan answered, a glittering title appeared above his head. King of Yu, Go Jian Jian Instance Dungeons first player. Yes. I can't be wrong. Tiger Loves Cat, who was watching the live stream, slammed the table again. This title completely proved that Guhan was the Military Governor, the super player Military Governor who had cleared the game with an SSS rank. H. I can't believe it's really you. I'm really too excited. Thank you again for accepting our interview. T. Don't thank me. You should thank the 30,000 yuan interview fee. Hui Naigwa was so embarrassed by Guhan's words that she couldn't say anything for a long time. Don't worry, Miss Hui Naigwa. We'll edit this part out later. Tiger Loves Cat reassured Hui Naigwa. H. Is Mr. Military Governor having financial difficulties recently? T. Yes, I recently owed a large sum of money to a certain family. I'm working hard to pay off my debt. H. Then Mr. Military Governor, you must take care of yourself. By the way, do you know that there are more than 1 billion discussions about you on the internet and the forums? T. I know that. I'm also a frequent poster on the forums. I've seen most of the discussions online. H. Then, why haven't you responded to the players who care about you online? T. In fact, I did. I posted an article online called I'm Military Governor. Let me tell you how to clear the SSS grade dungeon. Where is the detailed description of how I cleared the SSS grade dungeon? H. So you've already responded. Then can you face the camera and tell us, the readers of Invincible Swordsman, in detail how you got the SSS grade dungeon? T. Of course. Guhan nodded, which made Fukuhara Hui Naigwa excited. She also wanted to know how Guhan got the SSS grade dungeon. But the next second, Guhan's words directly made Hui Naigwa fall into the abyss. I'll give you a preferential price for the copyright citation fee. I'll charge you 5 million yuan, Guhan said seriously. Chapter 119. Tiger Love Cat, should we agree with him? Of course, Kigo Fukuhara couldn't do the 5 million renminbi idea. She could only ask the chief editor, Tiger Love Cat, who was watching the live broadcast. Logically speaking, Ji Han was very serious when he proposed the price of 5 million. He had done it after serious consideration. In history, there were many difficult instance dungeons. After the appearance of paid guides, the accumulated reading fees had basically exceeded 5 million. Ji Han felt that the price he offered was very generous. This was because the instance dungeon that he was going to announce was an instance dungeon that no one had ever successfully cleared in the past 200 years. But obviously, Tiger Love Cat didn't think so. He thought that Guhan was crazy about money and decisively rejected it. However, if the interview about the dungeon raid was missing, then the value of the interview would plummet. Tiger Love Cat thought about it and came up with an idea. He quietly said to Kigo Fukuhara, "Hurry up and find his post on the internet. Then, according to the content of the post, ask a question that wasn't mentioned in the post." Tiger Love Cat was very quick-witted. "Didn't you post a paid post on the internet? It shouldn't be a problem for me to pay to read your post, right? After I read it, it shouldn't be a problem for me to ask some questions about the post, right? H. Sorry, can I look at your post, Mr. Military Governor, and ask you some questions? T. As long as it doesn't involve the specific strategy mentioned in the post, I don't have any objections. Guhan thought about it and agreed. Although answering these questions would more or less leak some information about the strategy, this way, it would attract more popularity for his own post. It would make more players interested to open his post and see what was said in the post. Thus, Kigo Fukuhara and Tiger Love Cat spent 20 minutes at the same time, carefully reading Guhan's post several times. They couldn't help but be amazed by the whole process of the strategy. Respected player Military Governor, someone in the game read your linked account, Military Governor 12,508 is paid post. I am Military Governor, I will personally explain how to clear the SSS rating. After paying 5 RMB and deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 4 RMB has been automatically transferred into your account. Dear player Military Governor, someone in the game has read the paid post that your Military Governor 12580 has posted on the forum. I am Military Governor, and I will tell you how to get an SSS rating. After paying 5 RMB and deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 4 RMB has been automatically transferred into your account. At the same time, 2 such messages were transmitted to Guhan's communicator. Guhan's heart skipped a beat. He guessed that someone was watching this interview from behind. This person must be Hui Naigua's superior. Miss Hui Naigua, can you turn off the live broadcast? Guhan very directly said to Hui Naigua, our agreement only involves interviews, not live broadcasts. If you insist on broadcasting it to your boss, I think it's necessary to charge 3,000 yuan for the broadcasting fee. What? Hui Naigua was dumbfounded. Tiger Loves Cat, who was behind her, reacted quickly and shouted in the communicator, agree to it, give him 3,000 yuan. This time, Tiger Loves Cat did not reject it. Instead, he agreed immediately. After reading the guidepost, he had a stomach full of questions and wanted to ask Guhan. Hence, 3,000 yuan was transferred into Guhan's account, which was very pleasing. The chief editor and I have finished reading your guide, and we have to admit that it's a very detailed and unbelievable guide. I never thought that the first and second main missions could be simplified from 40 minutes to only 40 seconds. May I ask, Mr. Military Governor, how did you discover this shortcut? Hui Naigua asked the first question. This was also the question that the chief editor, Tiger Loves Cat, really wanted to know. What was in this military governor's head that he could think of such a tricky and unimaginable shortcut? This requires a long time to sort out the information. Guhan thought for a while and replied, I spent a lot of time looking for all sorts of information on the forum. Finally, I found some posts that revealed some clues. After putting them together, I found this shortcut. H. Then can you reveal the clues you found from those posts? T. No. H. We noticed that according to the plan in your post, the final battle with the boss should not exceed 10 minutes. As for how to defeat the boss within 10 minutes, you wrote it rather vaguely. Can you explain it more clearly? The last part of Guhan's writing was indeed vague because the last part was completely made up. It was impossible for Guhan to write about killing Fleeting Time Calendar, snatching the Yu King's sword, and clearing the dungeon as a sword master. At the end of the post, Guhan only gave a set of sword techniques and said that if he taught it to Kanzu Fleeting Time Calendar, he would be able to clear the dungeon. This was indeed a loophole. Guhan didn't know how to answer this question, so he casually said, didn't I give you a set of basic sword techniques? As long as you practice this set of sword techniques diligently and show it to Kanzu, with Kanzu's talent, he'll be able to learn it after watching it twice. Then, Kanzu can use the Yu King's sword to kill the boss. Guhan's answer was just an improvisation. However, he didn't expect that someone would actually follow this method and actually succeed. As expected, the sword master only needed to read it twice to learn the basic sword technique. Then, he held the form of the King of Yu's sword and killed the boss within 10 minutes. The world was indeed very strange. H. Then may I ask, where did you learn this basic sword techniques? T. I created it myself. H. Oh my god, you can create your own sword techniques at such a young age. Your swordsmanship must be very good, right? T. It's just SOSO. We saw that there was no information about the Wudang Peak dungeon in your guidepost. Can you tell us how you triggered the main storyline Easter egg here? T. Sure, it's still the same price. The copyright citation fee is 5 million. Revolving around the guidepost, Guhan and Hui Naigwa talked for another 10 minutes. Hui Naigwa decided to dig out more personal information about the military governor. Mr. Military Governor, I've been very curious since I saw you. Why do you have such a scary scar on your face? Is this how you look in real life? T. No, I'm not like this in real life. Then you deliberately set it like this when you created the character. May I ask why you set it like this? T. 5,000 yuan. This question is worth 5,000 yuan. Otherwise, I refuse to answer this question. Give it to him. Tiger loves cat roared in the office. T. According to my calculations, if you cut a scar on your face, you can increase a hidden attribute of the game character. What hidden attribute is it? T. 8,000 yuan. This question is worth 8,000 yuan. Otherwise, I refuse to answer this question. Give it to him. Tiger loves cat roared in the office. T. This hidden attribute, I call it lucky fate. Lucky fate? Hearing Guhan's words, Keisuo Fukuhara instantly thought of the previous broadcast that shook the entire game channel. She immediately asked Guhan excitedly, Mr. Military Governor, can the lucky fate attribute affect the probability of twisting an egg? A few hours ago, the broadcast mentioned that you had just cleared the Wudang Peak dungeon and obtained a golden egg. In addition to the golden egg from the Yu Wang Gojian Sword Instance dungeon, you've already gotten 2 golden eggs in a row. Is that the reason? T. 80,000 yuan. This question is worth 80,000 yuan. Otherwise, I refuse to answer this question. Give it to him. Tiger loves cat roared in the office. This news was too important. It was even more important than the SSS grade guide. He seemed to have seen the day when he would also get a golden egg. Chief Editor Tiger, our account is already less than 80,000 yuan. The finance department, who received another order from the chief editor to transfer the money, could not help but complain. I'll transfer it. I'll transfer it to you. I'll transfer it to Hui Naigwa. This news is too important. Tiger Loves Cat was so excited that he directly logged into his little treasury. This was the accumulated money that he had taken advantage of the company. It was more than a few 100,000 yuan. However, when Tiger Loves Cat was about to press the transfer button, he realized that this was illogical. Why should he pay for it himself? The magazine should be paying for it. Therefore, Tiger Loves Cat changed the transfer target to the magazine's company account. Then he said to the finance department, I'll first lend the company 80,000 yuan. Then, you can transfer it to Hui Naigwa's account. Remember to write me an IOU. The interest is 1% a day. Guhan, who had received the 80,000 yuan, nodded at Hui Naigwa. That's right. Fortune is used to increase the probability of the toy capsule machine. Tiger Loves Cat exploded. He suddenly felt that his magazine was going to be completely popular. 6 hours later, Invincible Swordsman magazine, which had never been so efficient, quickly finished editing the interview video. Then, it posted the video on the homepage of its website. Almost the entire homepage was covered by the advertisement poster of the video. There were no other links. The advertisement poster was extremely simple. It was a player with the name Military Governor and the image of the first person in the King of Yu Gojian Sword Instance dungeon. Below it was a red title, Exclusive Interview with the first person in the King of Yu Gojian Sword Instance dungeon. Revealing the SSS grade guide and mysterious fortune attribute. Another half an hour later, Invincible Swordsman's official website exploded. More than 5 million visitors had directly crushed the server quota allocated to the website by BAT. After an emergency request, BAT temporarily increased the server quota by 10 times. Only then did the website barely manage to run. A day later, the newbies who entered Sword Maiden Online had all become domineering scarred men. Chapter 120. When did you become so short of money? The first thing you talk about is money. After the interview, Kino Fukuhara rushed back to the editing department to prepare the video and interview draft. Akira Moon of that year, who was silently watching the whole interview process, smiled and said the first sentence. "I'm short of money." Ji Yu-han felt that there was nothing to hide. It was not a shameful thing to be short of money. "I now owe about $9 million, so if you have any way to make a lot of money, remember to tell me." "You actually owe so much. There's a game in reality." Hearing that Gu-han owed $9 million, Ming-yu felt that it was a bit unbelievable. This military governor didn't seem like the kind of person who liked to spend money recklessly. As an ancient sword holder, no matter how much he spent, it was impossible to spend millions in just a few days. "The reason is very complicated. In short, I owe so much money." Gu-han obviously didn't want to talk about this topic. Ming-yu naturally wouldn't ask for the reason. She just calmly and firmly asked, "Is it urgent? I'll lend it to you." "You'll lend it to me?" Although Gu-han guessed that Ming-yu was very rich, he didn't think that she could casually lend $9 million to a stranger. "It's not urgent. I don't need to change my creditor." Gu-han waved his hand. Ming-yu understood that Gu-han wouldn't accept her lending him money. She changed the topic and said, "I heard from Toad that you've become an ancient sword holder in reality. Congratulations." "There's nothing to congratulate. For me, it's just a matter of time. Since you asked me to come today, it shouldn't be as simple as accepting an interview, right?" As soon as Gu-han entered the door, he saw a man's coat hanging on the hanger in the room. Ming-yu and Hui Naigwa were both girls. How could there be a man's coat left in the room? This meant that before he came, there was another man here. When he saw him, he temporarily left. "How did you know?" Ming-yu of that year was shocked. Her expression was solemn. "Actually, other than Hui Naigwa, there's another person who wants to talk to you. I was afraid that you would be unhappy, so I asked him to go out for a walk first. After you and Hui Naigwa are done talking, we can talk about him. Let him come. Since you're willing to bring him to see me, it shouldn't be anything bad." Gu-han smiled. "What if it's something bad, or something that makes you unhappy?" Ming-yu's lips curled up as she asked. "Then I'll reject him." Gu-han smiled back. "I believe that Mr. Military Governor will not reject my suggestion." A bold voice came from outside the private room. Gu-han thought that the owner of the voice would push the door open after saying that. He didn't expect that he would knock on the door 3 times. "Can I come in?" "Mr. Military Governor." "Hello, Mr. Military Governor. I'm Yaoguang, the sect master of Yaoguang Sword Faction, Yaoguang. I'm also Ming-yu's brother." The person introduced himself as soon as he sat down. He was the sect master of Yaoguang Sword Faction, Yaoguang. He was also Ming-yu's brother. No wonder Ming-yu lent him 7 million. It turned out that she had the resources of Yaoguang Sword Faction to back her up. "It's an honor to meet you. So you're the sword spirit of Yaoguang. Your reputation precedes you. Military Governor is honored to meet Mr. Yaoguang today. What a pleasant surprise. Sword Spirit of Yaoguang was the title of Yaoguang. All spiritual swords and above would have such a title. Anyway, nice words didn't cost much. Gu-han wasn't stingy. By the way, before I officially explain the purpose of my visit, I'd like to apologize to Mr. Military Governor. I didn't pay just now and listen to your interview from outside the door. I, Yaoguang, would like to express my deep apologies. I hope that I can get Mr. Gu-han's forgiveness with this. Dear Military Governor, someone in the game has read the paid post posted on the forum by Military Governor 12580. I'm Military Governor. I'm here to explain the strategy to get an SSS rating. After paying 5 yuan and deducting 20% of the income tax, 4 yuan has been automatically transferred into your game account. Dear Military Governor, someone in the game has read the paid post posted on the forum by Military Governor 12580. I'm Military Governor. I'm here to explain the strategy to get an SSS rating. I think it's very good. I've tipped you 100,000. After deducting 20% of the income tax, 80,000 has been automatically transferred into your game account. Looking at the 2 messages that suddenly appeared on his personal terminal, Gu-han instantly understood that Yaoguang had tipped him. This person was really generous. 100,000 renminbi tipped him just like that. This was equivalent to the RMB that Guhan had earned from the entire interview. Mr. Yaoguang is indeed generous. I forgive you for eavesdropping. It would be impolite for military governor to reject this reward. Guhan was not going to play around with excuses like I don't deserve it or take back your money and don't insult my dignity. Regardless of whether the money was given to him or used to exchange for his forgiveness, the money was his. This is just a small greeting gift. Yaoguang was also a little surprised that Guhan had accepted it so readily. However, he did not show it on his face. Then, Yaoguang will not beat around the bush with Mr. Military Governor. This time, I'm looking for Mr. Military Governor because I'm curious about you and want to have a chat with you. Secondly, I have a business deal that I'd like to discuss with Mr. Military Governor. Discuss business with me. Guhan rolled his eyes. Like your sister, do you need me to clear a dungeon? Mr. Military Governor is indeed smart. I'll be straight to the point then. Yaoguang took a sip of tea. Last month, a member of my Yaoguang sword faction found a hidden dungeon in the ruins of Xianyang City. It's this dungeon that has been bothering Yaoguang for an entire month. Hidden dungeon. Guhan was shocked. This Yaoguang was actually looking for him to clear a hidden dungeon. In Sword Maiden Online, the hidden instance dungeon was a very special and rare instance dungeon. The rewards from hidden dungeons were more than a few times that of main and side dungeons. Most importantly, hidden dungeons were often dungeons that no one had ever cleared before. It was said that the system would place a hidden dungeon in the game every year and set a very complicated trigger condition. Once it was successfully triggered, the hidden dungeon would be in a semi-active state. Only the player who fulfilled the trigger condition could enter the dungeon. Once the team that cleared the hidden dungeon obtained an S-rank dungeon rating or above, the hidden dungeon would instantly become fully active. It would then be added to the main dungeon or side dungeon's dungeon tree, becoming a public dungeon that every player could participate in. As the first player team to obtain an S-rank or above rating, not only would they obtain a super reward of 10 times the drop rate of top-tier items, but they would also be able to choose any item from the entire dungeon's reward pool. If this reward pool included an absolute top-tier item like severed green hair, then they would also be able to choose any item they wanted. This was an irresistible temptation for every player. More importantly, if all the players in the team belonged to a sect, then the sect would obtain a huge amount of sect prestige and various rare rewards from the in-game council. Many unique sect buildings would be unlocked, and the sect would instantly become the focus of all players' attention and an object of gratitude. The most famous example was the current Sword Lady Online's number 1 sword sect, Stormy Waves. This number 1 sword sect, founded by Double Gendi, was because they had taken the first S-rank dungeon every year for 15 years in a row. They obtained a huge amount of resources as well as a supreme position in the hearts of the players. That was how they defeated their opponents and became the number 1 sword sect in Sword Lady Online. No wonder Yaoguang spent so much money to invite him to clear this hidden dungeon. As long as he succeeded in clearing it, Yaoguang's sword sect would obtain more than 100,000 renminbi. Guhan did not hesitate. How could Guhan reject the opportunity to clear a hidden dungeon that he might not encounter in his lifetime? Mr. Yaoguang, your team should have explored that dungeon many times, right? Is it convenient for you to show me the dungeon's information? Although Guhan made such a request, he was not sure if Yaoguang would show him the information. This was because Yaoguang's sword sect had spent a lot of time, resources, and even human lives to gather this information. It was too precious. It would be fine if Guhan expressed his willingness to join. However, if Guhan expressed his unwillingness to help after reading the information, Yaoguang would suffer a great loss. No problem, I have already prepared the information. Unexpectedly, Yaoguang transferred the information to his personal terminal. Thank you. Guhan thanked him and immersed himself in the information. This dungeon's name was very special. It was called King Arthur's Betrayal. However, note that King Arthur did not betray humans, but Yuan Ku. King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon, was one of the 10 heavenly kings of the Martyr's Palace. He was a powerful U-class Yuan Ku. 300 years ago, King Arthur, who had been fighting against humans, suddenly betrayed the Martyr's Palace and joined the human camp. He became the first U-class Yuan Ku to betray the Yuan Ku, causing a sensation in the entire human world. King Arthur's participation led the humans to launch a massive counterattack against the Martyr's Palace. Under the leadership of King Arthur, who was familiar with the Martyr's Palace, the humans destroyed more than 10 strongholds of the Martyr's Palace. They even killed 2 of the 10 heavenly kings, forcing the Martyr's Palace to hide in the dimensional rift. That period of time was the most glorious period of human history. However, in the 15th year after King Arthur joined the human camp, she mysteriously disappeared, and no one found any traces of King Arthur again. People began to say that the humans were afraid of King Arthur's identity as Yuan Ku, so they sent 3 immortal sword-grade swordbearers to ambush and kill King Arthur in the medicine-cleansing lake. This legend was very convincing and reasonable. However, the Sword Council and the Council had always firmly denied this point. The ending of King Arthur remained an unsolved mystery in everyone's hearts. Chapter 121. The King Arthur's Betrayal Instance Dungeon was adapted from the story of King Arthur's escape from the Martyr's Palace to Yangjing City. The player's final quest was to protect King Arthur as he escaped back to Yangjing City. Letting the swordbearers protect Yuan Ku as he escaped was something that Guhan found laughable. This instance dungeon was the entrance to a hidden instance dungeon that was unlocked in the ruins of Xianyang City by one of the Yaoguang sword sect's swordbearers who possessed the sword in the stone. This instance dungeon was a famed sword-level instance dungeon. The entry requirement was 6 swordbearers below famed sword level. The core members of the Yaoguang sword sect had formed 5 teams to clear the instance dungeon. At the same time, they began to clear the instance dungeon King Arthur's Betrayal. However, what the Yaoguang sword sect could not believe was that for the past month, they could not even clear the instance dungeon, let alone obtain an evaluation of S-class or above. Among the 5 teams, no matter which team it was, when they reached 60% of the instance dungeon's progress, they were unable to continue. They were stuck at that rate for a month. The Yaoguang sword sect had used various methods and developed more than 10 tactics. However, they were still unable to clear the 60% threshold. Now, the morale of the Yaoguang sword sect's clearing team was very low. A portion of the members had already expressed their desire to not waste time on this instance dungeon. What was more serious was that the news had somehow reached the ears of the 9th and 6th sects, the 9-state sword sect and the Hengshan sword sect. They had also found the players who possessed the sword in the stone and completed the chain quests to begin clearing the hidden instance dungeon. Although these 2 sects had started clearing the instance dungeon later than the Yaoguang sword sect, they relied on their deep foundations to far surpass the rising Yaoguang sword sect. Thus, they were able to quickly catch up. Together with the Yaoguang sword sect, they were stuck at the 60% threshold and could not move. However, with the foundations of these 2 sects, the Yaoguang sword sect estimated that they would surpass the threshold sooner or later. When that happened, all the efforts of the sect would become a joke. That was why the Yaoguang sword sect found Guhan, the player who had successfully cleared the SSS class instance dungeon for 200 years. He hoped to borrow the power of the military governor to help the Yaoguang sword sect break through the bottleneck. Guhan read the information for 4 hours. During those 4 hours, Guhan did not say a word. Yaoguang sword sect did not say a single word as he sat opposite Guhan and drank tea. Yaoguang sword sect did not say a word. Yu Ming Yu Chen of Moon could not stand the atmosphere. After 4 hours of reading, Guhan's sword sect had grasped the basic situation of the instance dungeon introduced in the information. In addition, Yaoguang sword sect also attentively attached the detailed log records and video recordings of every instance dungeon raid to the back of the information. This was equivalent to telling Guhan all the information Yaoguang sword sect had about the hidden instance dungeon without holding anything back. This was Yaoguang sword sect's greatest trust. It was also Yaoguang sword sect's greatest sincerity. Guhan sword sect was moved by this sincerity and trust. 4 hours later, Guhan sword sect's body, which had been sitting upright all this time, suddenly relaxed. His whole body leaned weakly on the sofa, seemingly exhausted. Mr. Military Governor, have you finished reading the information? Yaoguang's sword sect waited for Guhan to rest for another 10 minutes before he could not help but ask. Yes. Guhan's sword sect nodded and rubbed his temples. Moreover, I have some clues. Really? Yaoguang's sword sect could no longer remain calm. More than half of the tea in his hand spilled out. This was probably the best news he had heard in the past month. Really, but it is just a guess. I need more information to prove my guess. Guhan's sword sect's voice was weak. This requires time, a lot of time. Information? We have more. Our people have collected millions of words of information related to King Arthur. We can provide it to Mr. Military Governor, Yaoguang's sword sect said excitedly. Give it to me. You have my contact number. When the time comes, just send it to me. Guhan's sword sect nodded. As long as I can find the information I need to prove my guess, I have a 70% chance of clearing the entire instance dungeon. As for the S-class instance dungeon, before I truly understand the strength of the team, I cannot make a judgment. Good. I will send all the information and the ability information of the team members to you now. Unconsciously, Yaoguang's sword sect's address of Guhan's sword sect had added the word you. Yaoguang's sword sect's sword wielder was only one step away from the immortal sword. Using the word you to address Guhan's sword sect was a very prestigious thing. There is no hurry about the information. Guhan's sword sect waved his hand. Before that, I want to talk to you about my reward and then sign a contract. This is better for all of us. Of course, Mr. Military Governor Sword Sect, whatever reward you want, Yaoguang's Sword Sect can promise you. Yaoguang's Sword Sect said with sincerity. First, the entire instance dungeon is not completed in one go. It requires many experiments, which will waste a lot of my time farming essence sword pills. So I want to start from today until the end. It's fine if I don't succeed, but once I succeed in the S-class instance dungeon, I want 100 quark essence sword pills as compensation. Guhan's sword sect's first condition was that the market price of 100 quark essence sword pills was about 10,000 renminbi. In other words, Guhan's sword sect's daily labor fee was 10,000 renminbi, which was higher than the salary of a civil servant. No problem, it's fair. Yaoguang's sword sect agreed without thinking. It was only 10,000 renminbi. As long as he could pass the S-class evaluation, this was a very cost-effective deal. Second, I must join the team of 6 people, and the team must completely listen to my command. Guhan's sword sect's second condition. Basically, Guhan's sword sect's cooperation in all the instance dungeons. Guhan's sword sect was not willing to accept the command of a fool. Command is not a problem, but... The second condition made Yaoguang's sword sect hesitate. Mr. Yaoguang, do you think that I'm not strong enough and will be a burden if I join the team? Guhan went straight to the point and said what Yaoguang was thinking. That's right. I won't hide it from you, Mr. Military Governor. As you can see, the intensity of the battles in this instance dungeon is quite high. 6 famed swordsmen are already very difficult to deal with. If we lose one of them, I'm afraid we won't even be able to complete 50%. After all, you are only an ancient sword wielder. Your information is outdated. I'm no longer an ancient sword wielder, Guhan declared proudly. Military Governor, you're already a treasured sword wielder? Yarrow Guang's complexion became much better. With the strength of a treasured sword rank sword maiden and the strength of an admiral swordmaster, perhaps they could just barely match the strength of a famed sword rank sword wielder. However, there was a requirement, and that was that the admiral's treasured sword rank sword maiden must be one of the top sword maidens in the treasured sword record. May I know who Mr. Military Governor's swordmaster is? Yaoguang made up his mind. If Guhan could get his hands on one of the top 20 sword masters, he would agree to this condition. I don't have a sword master at the moment. Guhan's reply almost made Yaoguang fall off his chair. I'm sorry, Mr. Military Governor. Before you get your sword master, I will definitely not let you enter the instance dungeon. Yaoguang did not always listen to Guhan. In the face of certain things, Yaoguang chose to persist. Don't worry. I don't have a sword master, but I do have a famed sword master. Guhan's words were like dynamite, exploding in Yao Guang's ears. This person. How could he have a famed sword master? This was impossible. Famed sword master, King of Yu's Gojian sword. Does it meet your requirements? Gu Han threw another bomb in Yao Guang's ears. That was King of Yu's Gojian sword, ranked 18th in the famed sword record. How could a newbie like Gu Han, who had only entered the game for less than a week, possess King of Yu's Gojian sword? A famed sword master that had not appeared for more than 40 years. This is impossible. Becoming a famed sword master in a week. Mr. Military Governor, how did you do it? Yao Guang lost his elegance once again and asked urgently. Sorry, it's a personal secret. No comment. Of course, Gu Han would not tell Yao Guang that he only had around 2,000 quarks of sword essence. He was not a famed sword master at all. As for the Moongazer serpent, it was grafted from the dead Kanzu fleeting year calendar. Could it be? He consumed a large number of essence sword pills, so he became a famed sword master in just a few days? That was not right. Essence sword pills could only be consumed once a day. Even if he consumed a purple essence sword pill with 1,000 quarks of sword essence, it would still take him 10 days, unless he consumed a golden essence sword pill, the kind that cost 5,000 quarks. That's right, it must be like this. This was the reason why he owed 7 million renminbi. He owed money because he bought the golden essence sword pill. Gu Han did not know that Yao Guang had already very considerately imagined the reason why Gu Han had a famed sword master. After understanding the reason, Yao Guang regained his calm. People were like this. If they could not understand something, they had to find a reasonable explanation to calm down. Since Mr. Military Governor has the King of Yu's queen, the second request is naturally not a problem. I agree to it, Mr. Military Governor. Thirdly, I need a large amount of sword mark dust, crystals, fragments, crystals, enough for me to raise the King of Yu's mark to grade 1. Raising a famed sword master to grade 1 required a large amount of resources. For a sect like Yao Guang's sword sect, these resources were a huge expense. It was more than 10 times more expensive than 100 quarks of essence sword pills per day. Mr. Military Governor, isn't this request a bit too much? The flesh on Yao Guang's face twitched. If he agreed to this request, he would really have to pay a huge sum of money. I heard that the success rate of the King of Yu's mark is only 20%. If you want to raise the King of Yu's mark to grade 1, I'm afraid you'll need 10 million renminbi. Mr. Military Governor, isn't this a bit too much? Is it a bit much? Gu Han smiled. Is it a bit much compared to the first Clear's S-rank evaluation? It's just a drop in the bucket. Just like the essence sword pill, I'll give it to you after it's done. Yao Guang gritted his teeth. As long as he could succeed, he would accept this 10 million. No, before we leave, I want to raise the King of Yu's mark to grade 1. Gu Han said resolutely. That's impossible. If we fail, then wouldn't our Yao Guang sword sect lose 10 million renminbi? That's impossible. Mr. Yao Guang, think about it from another perspective. If we have the King of Yu's mark to grade 1 join the team, even if we use brute force, we should be able to push through the 60% threshold. Oh right, I forgot to say that my King of Yu's mark is natural, not man-made. Yao Guang's eyes were bloodshot as he stared straight into Gu Han's eyes. After a long while, he closed his eyes. Sure, but if you fail, then you must join my Yao Guang sword sect. You must serve my Yao Guang sword sect for at least 3 years. Deal. Chapter 122. When Gu Han logged out of the game, the medical pod had already been opened. His body was also placed on the hospital bed. The only thing that had not changed was that Qingpin was still lying on top of him. Qingpin probably felt a little cold. She even stuffed a pair of small feet into Gu Han's loose hospital pants. The position of the tip of her feet happened to be on top of a certain sensitive part of Gu Han. As a result, the moment he discovered this, Gu Han began to grow bigger. Haha, today's weather is pretty good. Gu Han quickly inserted his hands into Qingpin's armpits and carried her away from his body. Then, he tightened his belt and realized that in the entire ward, there was actually no one else but himself and Qingpin. This was not logical. Wasn't he staying in a VIP ward and enjoying the personal service of an exclusive nurse? It's good that there's no one else. Just nice, I can move around a bit. Guhan felt his newly grown left hand and then lifted Qingpin's little neck. Guhan, you're awake. Let's go eat meat together. Qingpin, who had been lifted up, also woke up from her sleep. The first thing she did when she woke up was to ask Guhan to take her to eat meat. Qingpin, do me a favor first, then I'll treat you to meat. What do you need help with? This penniless scholar wants. Before the penniless scholar could finish his sentence, his sword returned to its penniless scholar form. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword descends to the abyss. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword soldier kill. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword battling vault. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword inscription. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword spring. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword break. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword curtain. 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Sword in the field. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, peace before the sword. In one breath, Guhan practiced the 9 words sword formula of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven once in the ward. Guhan only went through the sword techniques and chi circulation methods of the 9 sword formulas once, and did not really use the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Otherwise, the ward would have been blasted into a pile of ruins by Guhan's sword chi. After practicing once, Guhan had a systematic understanding of his body's condition. First of all, his left arm had indeed grown back. Whether it was his reaction speed or nerve control, it was exactly the same as his original left arm. In fact, it could even be said to be stronger than before. This was good news, but naturally, there was also bad news. The bad news was that the meridians in Guhan's left arm had all returned to the state of a baby. The use of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven required the use of a person's meridians to transmit sword essence. According to the general outline of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, the left arm had 3 meridians and 14 acupuncture points that needed to be unblocked. In the past 12 years, Guhan had spent a whole 5 years to unblock these 3 meridians and 14 acupuncture points. But now, these meridians and acupuncture points had closed again. Although it would not take too much time to unblock them again with the experience of unblocking them the first time, Guhan's left arm would be considered useless for a long time. What was more serious was that among the 9-word sword formula of the 9 words of mysterious heaven, 5 of the sword formulas required the cooperation of the left arm's meridians in order to be used. In other words, half of Guhan's killer move, the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, was already useless. Lord Guhan, why are you up? You can't move right now. Guhan's personal nurse finally arrived. Looking at the deep imprint on her face from the keyboard, she must have slept very well. You came at the right time. I've fully recovered. I'm applying to be discharged now. Guhan threw the Qingpin sword back onto the bed. Then, with a flash of starlight, Qingpin spread his arms and legs, forming a Chinese character. His eyes were lifeless as he lay on the bed, looking as if he had been played by Guhan. Discharged. But the doctor said that your arm will have to stay here for at least 5 days. The personal nurse immediately refuted Guhan. 5 days. How much is the hospital fee for these 5 days? Well, it seems to be about 20,000 yuan. 4,000 yuan per day. I've already given you a 20% discount. This is a VIP intensive care unit, after all. When the exclusive nurse revealed the price, Ji Yuhan's determination to leave the hospital was even more firm. I know my arm best. Either you help me with the discharge procedures now, or I'll do it myself. You only have these 2 choices, Guhan said resolutely. Seeing Guhan's attitude, the nurse had no choice but to jog out of the ward. She was probably going to report this problem to the doctor. After a few minutes, the nurse jogged back. Lord Guhan, the doctor said that we must give you a comprehensive examination. Only after you have fully recovered can you be discharged. Otherwise, our hospital won't be responsible for any problems. I can't believe that after 1,000 years, the hospital is still like this. Guhan complained. Let's go. Where are we going for the examination? I'll go with you. Guhan, Bring me. Qingpin will go with you. When Qingpin heard that Guhan was going for the examination, he immediately recovered from the state of being played. He jumped from the bed to Guhan's shoulder. You're so annoying. Guhan, where's Qingpin's small room? Small room. Guhan was stunned for a moment before he realized that Qingpin was probably referring to the pouch hanging around his neck. When I get home, I'll buy another one online. Hello, please lie on the number 1 examination seat. We will immediately start a comprehensive examination of your body. When Guhan heard the voice, he suddenly felt that it was somewhat familiar. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw that it was the reasonable doctor again. Hey, how have you been? There was a saying that if 2 strangers met more than 3 times in a very short period of time, it would be the beginning of a perfect relationship. Of course, Guhan did not know this saying. He just felt that since they had met twice, it was only right for him to greet her. Damn, it's you again. The doctor was also very speechless. Why did she meet this man again? Sorry to trouble you, but please help me do another examination. TSK, the last time we met, it was a brain health examination. This time, it's a full body health examination. The doctor was amazed. She walked to Guhan's side and looked at him a few times. What did you do this time? Something wrong with the game again? It's nothing. Yuan Ku chopped off one of my hands, but thanks to you doctors, it grew back. His hand was chopped off. Lady Doctor was taken aback. It wasn't like she had never seen a person with a severed hand. Let alone a severed hand, it wasn't like she had never seen a person with a severed head that was frozen. It wasn't unusual. However, this guy had only become a sword wielder for a few days. How could he have such a cruel fight with Yuan Ku? Wasn't he a little too diligent on the battlefield? Let's get to know each other. My name is Song Ifei. The girl reached out a hand to Guhan, indicating that she wanted to shake hands with Guhan. Guhan looked puzzled. Song Ifei blushed and explained, I don't mean anything else. I just think that it must be very interesting to be friends with someone like you who comes to the hospital every day. Oh, it's indeed very interesting. Guhan smiled and shook Song Ifei's hand. Hello, I'm Guhan. Hello, I'm Qingpin. Qingpin sat on Guhan's neck and put a small hand on Guhan's and Song Ifei's hands. Guhan, let's do a body examination together, okay? Get off me. On the computer screen, the data of Guhan's body gradually appeared on the form. Compared to the previous 2 tests, the test this time was much more detailed. There were more than 100 items of body data. Originally, the examination room for Guhan's discharge did not need to be so complicated. However, the leader of the hospital suddenly ordered Song Ifei to use all the testing methods and test every item on Guhan thoroughly. Only after everything was confirmed would he be allowed to leave the hospital. Song Ifei could not understand why the hospital would pay so much attention to this sword wielder named Guhan. Of course, she did not know that Long Quan, the secretary of the dean of Yuzhang University, had a 5-minute call with the dean of the hospital. More than 100 items of test data were released one by one. Everything was very normal. Soon, there were only a few pieces of data that had not been confirmed. Nerve sensitivity, normal. Sperm activity, high. Corpus spongiosum. Phut, what the hell is this test? Song Ifei blushed and turned off all the data. Sword element value, 1119 quarks. Everything is normal. There seems to be no problem. Chapter 123. No wonder you lost an arm in just a few days. Although strength is important, you shouldn't risk your life. Did you sneak out of the city? Song Ifei asked Guhan out of nowhere. Left the city? I didn't leave the city. Although Guhan did not know why Song Ifei would suspect him of sneaking out of the city, he could not put the blame on him. The base city was very strict with humans leaving the city. Without special permission, ordinary people and sword-bearers were not allowed to leave the city. However, there was no such thing as climbing over walls. If a person decided to sneak out of the city, it was not difficult, as long as he was prepared to bear the consequences of being discovered. It was easier for ordinary people. If they wanted to go out and seek death, they could do so. Nobody would care about the life or death of an ordinary person. If they were caught, they would just have to pay some contribution points and a fine. They would not even be sent to jail. However, if sword bearers were discovered sneaking out of the city, they would be severely punished. The lightest punishment would be to spend a few years in jail, while the heaviest punishment would be to be assigned to the beacon tower. In short, if sword bearers were discovered sneaking out of the city, they would have to pay a heavy price. You still won't admit it. Song Yifei threw a report to Guhan. Then explain to me what's going on with your sword essence. Sword essence. Guhan's pupils dilated as he looked at the report. He trembled and pinched the edge of the paper as if he was going to tear it into pieces at any time. What? Are you scared? I was right. Song Yifei thought that Guhan was trembling because he was afraid that he would find out that he had sneaked out of the city. I don't understand. You've only become a sword bearer for a few days. Why did you risk your life to sneak out of the city to fight with Yuan Ku? Yuzhong University will arrange for all of you to go out of the city for actual combat. There will also be high-level sword bearers by your side to protect you so that you can get through the most dangerous stage of growth. Isn't that safer? Yes, secretly sneaking out to fight with Yuan Ku by yourself. This kind of growth is far faster than the Academy's unified plan, but you're playing with your own life. Do you know how many sword bearers Yuan Ku cripples me every day? How many unlucky sword bearers would he clean up their remains? Most of the sword bearers died without even leaving behind their bones. As Song Yifei lectured Guhan earnestly to cherish his life, he thought to himself, this fella is quite amazing. In just a few days, he's already accumulated more than 1,000 quarks of sword essence. The dimensional vortex of a mouse-level Yuan Ku could at most increase his sword elements by 7 or 8 quarks. This guy had actually killed more than 100 Yuan Ku in just a few days. Moreover, he did it secretly and killed them all by himself. Isn't this amazing fella a little too much? With his ability, I'm afraid that following Yuzhong University's team would be a real waste of time. I didn't expect you to guess everything correctly. Guhan threw away the report in his hand in resignation. He sighed and revealed a desolate expression. I admit that I snuck out of the city, but due to a moment of carelessness, I actually fell into your hands. Kill me or torture me, do as you please. Why did you have to be so radical? Why can't you be more cautious? Song Yifei did not say what he was going to do with Guhan. Instead, he began to ask why Guhan did this. There's nothing to explain. If your parents and sister also died under the attack of Yuan Ku, you'll understand what I'm thinking. I'm sorry, I don't know about this. Song Yifei's heart softened when he heard about Guhan's miserable life and saw his sorrowful expression. Don't worry, I haven't sent this report up yet. I'm the only one who knows about it now. So what? Aren't you going to tell on me? Guhan stared at Song Yifei with his red eyes. Song Yifei was so embarrassed that he turned his face away. I won't tell on you this time, but you have to promise me that you will never sneak out of the city again. It's too dangerous. Well, Guhan hesitated for a while and gritted his teeth. He looked like he had made up his mind. Okay, I promise you, I won't sneak out of the city anymore. Words are no proof. I have to supervise you. Song Yifei was not stupid. He knew that Guhan was probably trying to fool him. How about this? Give me your number. I'll contact you once a day to see if you're staying in the base city, as long as you're happy. After completing the discharge procedures, Guhan walked out of the hospital and was on his way home. On the way home, Guhan did not say a word. Even when Qingpin, who was in Guhan's arms, threatened to pee on Guhan, Guhan ignored it and walked home mechanically. The reason why Guhan was silent was because of the extra 1,000 quarks of sword essence. After leaving the hospital, Guhan purposely found a secluded corner. When Qingpin pouted, Qingpin still returned to his sword and used Sword of the Abyss. A total of 11 sword energies danced around Guhan, cutting all the junk in the corner into pieces. One sword energy of Sword of the Abyss would consume 100 quarks of sword essence. 11 sword energies would consume 1,100 quarks of sword essence. This math problem that even a child would not get wrong told Guhan that he indeed had 1,100 quarks of sword essence in his body. After becoming a sword wielder in the game, Guhan had also stepped into the threshold of a sword wielder in real life. As long as he synchronized with a sword wielder, Guhan would truly become a sword wielder. Everything happened so suddenly and so unbelievably. It was like when he suddenly found out that he had 100 quarks of sword essence and became an ancient sword wielder. However, what was the source of the 1,000 quarks of sword essence? This was something that Guhan could not figure out at all. Of course, it could not be to go out of the city to hunt Yuan Ku as Song Yifei had guessed. The readers who had been reading this novel all knew that our Guhan had been staying in the city obediently for the past few days. Apart from killing a demonic beast and logging into the game for a while, he did not do anything else, let alone go out of the city, which was a troublesome matter that the author could write dozens of chapters on. So, where did the source of the 1,000 quarks of sword essence come from? Guhan carefully recalled what had happened in the past few days. He felt that there were only two things that could have increased his sword essence. One was that Qing Pin had killed the demonic beast and obtained the sword essence from its dimensional vortex, which allowed him to increase his sword essence by 1,000 quarks. It sounded very reliable, but in fact, it was a very nonsensical guess. First of all, the demonic beasts were soul-level essence silhouettes. Even if they died, they would only be able to absorb about 50 quarks of sword essence from the dimensional vortex and transfer it to him at most about 25 quarks. At most, he would be able to absorb 30 quarks. It was a far cry from 1,000 quarks. It was impossible. In that case, could it be that because this demonic beast had evolved from a small demonic beast, it mutated and produced 2,000 quarks of sword essence in the dimensional vortex? This was a certain possibility. After all, Guhan had the template of a main character. It was still acceptable for such a mutation to happen once or twice. However, in reality, it was still impossible. This was because Guhan had asked Qing Pin. The sword essence absorbed from the dimensional vortex was still stored in Qing Pin's body. Qing Pin had not had the time to transfer it to Guhan. It was precisely because of this that the possibility of it being the demonic beast was completely eliminated. There was only one possibility left, the 1,000 quarks of sword essence obtained in-game. When Guhan fought the demonic beast, his sword essence was still more than 100 quarks, so he must have obtained the 1,000 quarks of sword essence after killing the demonic beast. After that, Guhan only stayed in-game for a few hours and did the following things: negotiating with Yaoguang, accepting an interview, finding someone to repair Qingyu, and receiving the reward from the dungeon settlement center. He swallowed various pills and oral fluids worth 2,000 quarks of sword essence. Clearly, negotiating, interviewing, and finding someone couldn't increase the sword essence in his body. The only possibility left was the 2,000 quarks of sword essence that Guhan had swallowed. With this in mind, Guhan's thoughts gradually became clear. The crux of the problem was likely the 2,000 quarks of sword essence. The actual sword essence Guhan measured was 1,119 quarks. The previous measurement was 110 quarks. In between, Guhan had increased a total of 1,009 quarks of sword essence. And Guhan had swallowed 2,000 quarks of sword essence in-game. According to 0.9%, Guhan's theoretical increase in sword essence should actually be 18 quarks. There seemed to be a strange connection between the two numbers 1,009 and 18, revealing the truth of the matter. However, Guhan couldn't figure out where the connection was. Guhan, we're home. If you go any further, you'll hit your head. Qing Pin, who was in Guhan's arms, suddenly stood up and bit Guhan's neck. Guhan felt the pain and escaped from the world full of numbers. Only then did he realize that he had walked to the entrance of the residential area. If he took another step, he would directly hit the door. Welcome home, master. When Mayun opened the door and knelt at the door with a docile look on her face, welcoming Guhan home. Hey, is Qing Pin's meat ready? Qing Pin wants to eat meat. Once home, Qing Pin jumped onto the table and clamored for meat. The glutton in her stomach had completely flared up. It's ready. This morning, I received a call from Lord Guhan, so Mayun prepared your favorite dongpa pork for Lady Qingpin. After saying that, Qingpin opened the lid of the bowl on the table, and a bowl full of dongpa pork appeared. Qingpin cheered, and without washing her hands, she grabbed a piece of dongpa pork and stuffed it into her mouth. Qingpin, I told you to eat with chopsticks. When Guhan saw Qingpin's careless and unruly manner, he had a headache and tried to persuade her. TSK, at that time, Qingpin ate with her hands. Qingpin swallowed the dongpa pork in her mouth indifferently, and then her little face instantly puffed up in dissatisfaction. Guhan, this meat tastes completely different from what Qingpin ate before. It's so disgusting. I'm sorry, Lady Qingpin. I don't have enough money to buy natural pork, so I had to buy some synthetic pork. When Mayun explained timidly, Guhan smiled bitterly. It seemed that until now, the food expenses at home were still paid for by Wen Mayun. Thus, Guhan patted Qingpin's head, bear with it. When I pay off my debt, I'll treat you to natural pork every day. No, Qingpin doesn't want to eat synthetic meat that tastes disgusting. Qingpin wants to eat delicious natural pork. Don't fool around. Aren't synthetic pork and natural pork the same? Aren't they both pork? Guhan persuaded helplessly. No, synthetic pork tastes disgusting, and natural pork tastes delicious. How can they be the same thing? Qingpin was firm in her belief. If there's pork in the name, are they really the same pork? Let me tell you, this. Halfway through his words, Guhan had a flash of inspiration. He left Qingpin and went straight to his bedroom. As he walked, he said, I understand. I understand. I understand. Chapter 124. When Mayun saw Guhan barging into the room without thinking, she asked worriedly, Is Master okay? It's okay, it's okay. Even if Guhan is crazy, Qingpin will still like Guhan. Although the synthetic meat did not taste very good, Qingjian still tried his best to stuff 2 large pieces into his mouth. He picked up another piece with his hand and brought it to Wen Mayun. He said in a childish voice, Good girl, open your mouth. Wen Mayun's face was full of doubt, but she still opened her mouth obediently. Master's orders could not be disobeyed, and Master's sword lady's orders could not be disobeyed either. You cooked very well. Qingpin is very happy. This piece of meat is for you. Inside the room, Guhan did not turn on the computer. Instead, he took out a pen and wrote on a piece of paper, calculating something. In the future, 1,000 years later, even in the era of technological explosion, paper was still a necessity in human life. There was nothing that could replace the pleasure of calculating and writing on paper. Just now, Qingpin said, No, synthetic pork tastes bad, and natural pork tastes good. How can they be the same thing, and pork has pork in its name, so are they really the same pork? These 2 sentences made Guhan suddenly understand. How can Essence Sword Pill and Essence Oral Solution be the same thing? Essence Sword Pill and Essence Oral Solution both have sword essence in their names, so are they really the same thing? That's right, Essence Sword Pill and Essence Oral Solution were 2 different things. If you looked at them as 2 different things, then everything became very clear. The Essence Sword Pill and Essence Oral Solution that Guhan obtained each took up half of the 2,000 quarks of Essence Oral Solution, which was 1,000 quarks. According to the 0.9% conversion rate, the Essence Sword Pill and Essence Oral Solution should each increase Guhan's sword essence by 9 quarks. Then, in reality, Guhan increased the sword essence by 1,009 quarks. Did he notice the problem? The actual 1,009 quark sword element was exactly the sum of 1,000 quarks and 9 quarks. In that case, Guhan could make a bold guess that among the 1,000 quarks of sword essence pills and 1,000 quarks of sword essence oral solution, one of the 1,000 quarks had been successfully converted into 9 quarks of sword essence, while the other 1,000 quarks had all been converted into 1,000 quarks of sword essence in reality. This was a very shocking discovery. Guhan could actually convert 100% of the sword essence obtained in the game into reality. No matter how talented a genius was, his conversion rate was only 2%. Moreover, it was much faster to obtain sword essences in the game than in reality. In the game, A sword wielder at the treasure sword level might be at the famed sword level or even the spiritual sword level. Even if it was an immortal sword tier, it would not be impossible. This was because the speed of obtaining sword essences in the game was far faster and safer than in real life. What did this mean? This meant that he only needed to lie in bed and use his brain, and he could grow faster than those sword wielder who had been fighting in reality for years or even decades. There was no danger to his life at all. Guhan could even surpass the speed of all geniuses and saw. It was not a myth to accumulate 10 million quarks of sword essence at the age of 30 and become an Emperor sword level sword wielder. This meant that Guhan had opened a super cheat that accelerated his experience by 10 times. If Guhan spent a lot of money to buy all the sword essence pills in the game and bought a pill with 10 million quarks of sword essence in one go, did that mean that Guhan could become an Emperor sword level sword wielder in just one day? Guhan found a shortcut to quickly become an Emperor sword level sword wielder and realize his dream. This shortcut did not require any effort. He just needed to spend money. However, when Guhan calmed down and thought about it, he immediately rejected the possibility of spending money to buy sword essence. This was because the extra 1000 quarks of sword essence was 100% from the sword essence oral solution, not the sword essence pill or the sword essence pill. Why was Guhan so sure? The reason was simple. Connecting it to the last time Guhan broke through 100 quarks of sword essence and became an ancient sword level sword wielder, everything became clear. At first, Guhan thought that it was because he synchronized the King of Yu Gojian sword and secretly obtained 10,000 quarks of sword essence. After a 0.9% conversion, he broke through to 110 quarks. Now that he thought about it, that was a big mistake. Out of the 110 quarks, only 1 quark came from the 0.9% conversion from the sword essence pill and the sword essence pill. The remaining 100 quarks all came from the bottle of sword essence oral solution, green, obtained from the Genuine Guardian Mansion instance dungeon. The bottle of sword essence oral solution had increased the sword essence value by exactly 100 quarks. What a pity. If I had left a bottle of the oral solution unconsumed, I would be able to verify my guess now. Guhan thought regretfully. Why did he drink all of it in one go and leave one bottle behind? Now that he drank it, he could test the sword essence value to see if it increased by the same amount in reality. The answer would be clear at a glance. Although he could not verify his guess, Guhan was almost certain that the 1000 quarks of sword essence in reality came from the mysterious sword essence oral solution. There was no doubt about it. After understanding this, Guhan threw away the paper in his hand, turned on his computer, and started searching for information about the sword essence oral solution. After a few minutes, the sword essence oral solution, which was something that Guhan did not pay attention to, was organized in Guhan's mind. First of all, it was worth noting that the sword essence oral solution had a history of nearly 200 years since its first appearance in the game. During these 200 years, no less than 10 billion bottles of the sword essence oral solution had appeared in the game. More than 100 million players had consumed the sword essence oral solution. However, none of the players had ever been like Guhan, who could convert the sword essence in the sword essence oral solution 100% into reality. To other players, the sword essence oral solution, sword essence pill, and sword essence pill were no different. They were just a method to increase the sword essence in the game. The conversion rate was the same as the sword essence pill and sword essence pill. After all, hundreds of millions of players had consumed the sword essence oral solution at the same time. It was impossible for the Sword Council or the Council to erase the hidden information. Guhan had a vague guess that he must have some kind of special physique to be able to convert the sword essence brought by the sword essence oral solution 100%. However, Guhan did not know if he was the only player with such a physique. Even if there were people like him, the number of them was pitifully small. It might not exceed the number of fingers. Guhan even suspected that there was a special connection between his physique and the fact that his innate sword essence was only 9 quarks. After the age of 6, the innate sword essence stopped increasing. Guhan suspected that the source of this physique might be the mysterious patriarch of Gendi. There were too many secrets hidden in this. When Guhan thought about it, He trembled with excitement and fear. Guhan decided that he had to keep this secret a secret until he became an invincible emperor sword wielder. Only then could he really pursue the answer to this secret. The second thing worth paying attention to was the source of the sword essence oral solution. The source of the sword essence oral solution was very special. Other than some special crusade missions, special instance dungeons, and the golden capsule in the capsule machine, which had a very small chance of obtaining it, there was only one way to obtain a large amount of the sword essence oral solution. That was to give it to the players as a reward for the 8 Cities Sword Conference that was held once every 10 years. The 8 Cities Sword Conference was a grand competition that was held once every 10 years. All players could sign up to participate in the 8 Cities Sword Conference. The winner would receive the supreme title of number 1 in the world. They could wear this title on their head for a whole 10 years and enjoy the admiration of countless players. Players had to first sign up in the city they belonged to. For example, Guhan naturally had to sign up in Yuzhang City. After signing up, players would be assigned to various groups according to their level at the time of signing up, such as the Ancient Sword Group, the Treasured Sword Group, the Famous Sword Group, the Spiritual Sword Group, the Fairy Sword Group, and other competition groups. The strongest 8 people in each group would form the representative team of the respective city to participate in the final battle of the 8 Cities Sword Conference. They would fight for the title of number 1 in the world, number 1 in the Ancient Sword Group, Treasured Sword Group, Famous Sword Group, and other exciting titles. As long as one signed up to participate in the competition, they would receive sword element oral liquid as a reward, regardless of whether they won or lost. Of course, the winner would receive twice as much sword element oral liquid as the loser. Moreover, as the battle continued, the sword element oral liquid as a reward would become higher and higher. Guhan looked up the previous rewards of the 8 Cities Sword Conference. The sword wielder who obtained the title of number 1 in the world would receive 100 red bottles of super sword element oral liquid. Each bottle would directly increase the sword element oral liquid by 10,000 sword element. As for the champion of each group, they would receive 1 red bottle, 2 red bottles, 5 red bottles, 10 red bottles, 20 red bottles, and so on and so forth. Seeing these rewards, Guhan was instantly burning with excitement. Guhan was now an Ancient Sword Group. As long as he obtained the title of number 1 in the Ancient Sword Group, he would receive 2 red bottles of sword element oral liquid that contained 20,000 sword element. This meant that in the real world, Guhan could instantly obtain 20,000 quarks of sword element. One more step and he would become a famous sword wielder in the real world. However, 20,000 sword element was not Guhan's goal. In Guhan's eyes, the 5 red bottles of sword element oral liquid from the title of number 1 in the famous sword group was not something that was out of reach. As long as Guhan could break through 10,000 sword element in the game and become a famous sword wielder before the 8 Cities Sword Conference began, it would be enough. Looking at the schedule of the 8 Cities Sword Conference, it was a coincidence that the next 8 Cities Sword Conference would be held this year. From today onward, there were 49 days left until the registration deadline for the 8 Cities Sword Conference. There were 50 days left until the first battle of the first day of the 8 Cities Sword Conference. Chapter 125. Ji Han walked out of the room feeling refreshed. Having figured out a lot of things, he seemed a little excited. This was very normal. Anyone who discovered that they had unlocked a super cheat would be so excited that their whole body would tremble and they wouldn't be able to sleep for the whole night. It was not easy for Ji Han to only look excited, which was already a very difficult thing to do. Back in the living room, Qingpin had already finished the big pot of dongpa pork. However, the dongpa pork didn't seem to be able to satisfy Qingpin's appetite. She kept pestering Wen Maiyun and pulled down the chest area of her maid costume. Half of her breasts were clearly visible. Well done, Qingpin. Little sister Maiyun, this poor one's stomach is still very hungry. Can you go and buy some meat for this poor one? Even if it's synthetic meat, it's fine. The poor one begged Wen Maiyun pitifully. Wait. Why did Qingpin call Wen Maiyun his little sister? In terms of age and body shape, it was just right for Qingpin to call Wen Maiyun mom. Lady Qingpin, I don't have any more money in my personal terminal. I can't buy any meat for you to eat. Wen Meiyun's hair was a mess and her clothes were in a mess. Cough cough. Qingpin, what are you doing? Hurry up and come down. Look at what you've done to Meiyun. Also, you should call Meiyun big sister, not little sister. Gu Han smiled as he grabbed Qingpin from Wen Meiyun's body and pulled her into his arms. But Qingpin is older than Meiyun. Qingpin is already hundreds of thousands of years old. Qingpin spat out a few hundred words in a single breath. In order to be a big sister, Qingpin was willing to go all out. You're talking back. Gu Han pinched Qingpin's mouth and then asked Wen Meiyun, who was tidying up her clothes, Meiyun, how much have you paid since you entered my house? About 1,000 yuan. Wen Meiyun lowered her head and said softly, Hey, take out your personal terminal. Gu Han ordered. Oh. Wen Meiyun raised her right hand obediently. She knew that this meant that Gu Han was transferring money to her personal terminal. Sure enough, Gu Han also extended his right hand and touched Wen Meiyun's personal terminal. Go buy another 10 pounds of meat for Qingpin. Remember to buy natural, not synthetic. Natural. Wen Meiyun was a little surprised. Although the market price of natural pork wasn't as expensive as Chanel's 800 yuan per pound, it was still around 500 yuan. 10 pounds would be 5,000 yuan. Although Gu Han didn't say it, Wen Meiyun could tell from some details that Gu Han's agent should be very tight on money. The day before yesterday, he only had a little more than 100 yuan for vegetables, and he didn't even give it to her. Why would he be so generous and directly buy 5,000 yuan of pork? This master couldn't be thinking about her remaining 200,000 yuan, right? Wen Meiyun speculated anxiously. She carefully looked at the balance on her personal terminal, and then, with a red face, she quickly ran out of the house. Her master actually transferred 100,000 renminbi to her, and she actually suspected that her master was trying to cheat her of her money. She was really too petty. She felt so guilty. After watching Wen Meiyun leave the house, Gu Han pinched Qingpin's nose. All right, your meat is coming soon. Be happy. Mph, this is what Gu Han should do. It's Gu Han's responsibility to feed Qingpin and let Qingpin eat well and sleep well. Qingpin won't be happy. Although Qingpin said so, his face was full of joy. He wrapped his arms around Gu Han's neck and kissed Gu Han's lips lightly. This is your reward. Stinky Gu Han. Gu Han touched his lips in disbelief. My first kiss is gone just like that. This isn't my first kiss. It's just a kiss on the lips. Kids don't understand. This isn't my first kiss. Gu Han comforted himself and grabbed the soft flesh on Qingpin's neck again. Qingpin, can I trouble you to return the sword? What? Are you going to play with Qingpin's body again? When Qingpin heard that Gu Han wanted him to return the sword, he immediately blushed. Come to think of it, this was indeed a way to play with Qingpin's body. Not. No. Want. I just want to take back the sword essence in your body. The sword essence absorbed from the dimensional vortex is still in your stomach. Ji Yuhan said, enunciating each word in a heavy tone, I just want to retrieve the sword essence in your body. After destroying the demonic beasts yesterday and Qingpin absorbing the sword essence from the dimensional vortex, Gu Han had not transferred the sword essence from Qingpin's body. Now that he was home, Gu Han finally remembered this and wanted to retrieve the sword essence. That's right. Qingpin clapped his hands excitedly. Gu Han, Qingpin remembers that the teacher taught Qingpin that the fastest way to transfer the sword essence is to mouth to mouth. Let's give it a try. No. Want. 3 black lines appeared on Gu Han's forehead. When Li Xian was in class, wasn't Qingpin sleeping happily in his arms? How did she hear such a thing? Li Xian shouldn't have saved him yesterday. It would have been best if he died. I'll count to 3. Qingpin, if you return the sword, I'll pull out your sword hilt. All right. Qingpin, return the sword. Stupid Gu Han, you're always playing with Qingpin. After leaving these words in a huff, Qingpin's body turned into starlight and dissipated bit by bit, turning back into Qingpin's sword in Gu Han's hand. Gu Han smiled helplessly and sat on the ground in a meditative posture. Then, He inserted Qingpin's sword into his collar and pressed the blade tightly against his chest. He closed his eyes and began to feel the sword mark in his purple palace. Inside Guhan's mysterious purple palace, a sword shadow that was similar in appearance to Qingpin's sword was suspended in the purple palace like a mosaic. This was the sword mark of Qingpin's sword. Every sword mark that was synchronized for the first time was blurry like this. Only after 9 deep sword marks could the sword mark change from a mosaic form to a level that was exactly the same as Qingpin's sword in reality. The clearer the sword mark in the purple palace, the more powerful the sword lady would be and the more skills she would be able to master. Guhan gradually attached his consciousness to the sword mark in his purple palace and controlled the sword mark to slowly float out of his purple palace. It appeared outside his body and gradually approached Qingpin's sword that was pressed against his chest. If someone were to look at Guhan at this moment, they would see a glowing sword-shaped light floating out from Guhan's chest. It slowly merged with Qingpin's sword, causing Qingpin's sword to emit a glowing light. Guhan, is that you? Have you entered Qingpin's body? After Guhan controlled the sword mark to merge with Qingpin's sword, he heard Qingpin's surprised voice. Yes, I'm in your body now. Guhan answered. He, is Qingpin's body comfortable? Not really. It's so tight that it's hard to breathe. Guhan honestly answered what he felt. After entering Qingpin's body, Guhan's consciousness could feel a severe sense of oppression, as if there was a terrifying existence inside Qingpin's body. Qingpin, inject the sword essence you obtained into my sword mark. Oh. Qingpin responded unhappily. A few seconds later, a ball the size of a longan floated to the side of the sword mark controlled by Guhan. This longan-sized ball of coal was all the sword essence Qingpin had obtained from the dimensional vortex. According to the information, if the sword essence mass perceived by the mind was the size of a longan, it meant that this ball of sword essence was about 50 quarks, which was similar to the upper limit of 50 quarks that the soul-grade Yuan Ku's dimensional vortex could provide. It seemed that this demonic beast was indeed a peak soul-grade Yuan Ku. Guhan thought silently. Suddenly, this ball of sword essence began to slowly disperse, gradually turning from a solid longan into a cloud. Then, this cloud slowly floated into the sword mark. This meant that the sword essence had officially begun to transfer. He didn't know if everyone had seen sand screening before. It was to sprinkle coarse sand with various small stones on a screen that looked like a window screen. The fine sand would leak through the screen, while the small stones would remain on the screen. At this moment, Guhan's sword mark seemed to be acting like a screen. The seemingly solid cloud of sword essence entered from one side of the sword mark and floated out from the other side. However, it became a lot looser. A portion of the sword essence passed through this screening process and remained in Guhan's sword mark. However, unlike the screen, the sword essence that leaked out were not small stones that were unsuitable for the sword mark. Instead, they were exactly the same as the sword essence that was left behind. Until now, humans had not figured out why a portion of the sword essence could not be left in the sword mark. Generally speaking, the sword essence transferred by the sword mark transfer method was fixed at about 50%. This was a common figure for all sword wielders. However, what was strange was that 70% of the sword essence actually remained in Qingpin's body, and only 30% entered Guhan's sword mark. In other words, when killing a Soul Realm Yuan Ku, Guhan actually obtained 20% less sword essence than others. Just like the sword essence oral fluid, there was no record of a sword wielder using the sword essence transfer technique in the past 1,000 years of history who had only managed to transfer 30% of the sword essence. This meant that if he only relied on killing Yuan Ku to increase his sword essence, Guhan might be twice as slow as other sword wielders. When Guhan withdrew the sword mark into his body and released the sword essence into his purple palace, he opened his eyes and ended the first sword mark transfer in Guhan's life. Qingpin, can you explain why only 20% of the sword essence went to? Asked Guhan very solemnly as he stroked Qingpin's little head after Qingpin returned to her sword maiden form. Qingpin can feel that there is something in Qingpin's body, said Qingpin, who rarely showed a cute expression. There seemed to be a hint of sorrow on her face. Qingpin wants to accumulate the power to break through that thing, is that so? Guhan was stunned. He thought of the sword burial ground when he met Qingpin, thought of Kunzu, and thought of the little fiend who suddenly lost the ability to fly. Qingpin seemed to be hiding a lot of secrets. These secrets were a lot more than the secrets he had on him. Guhan even speculated that there was a certain connection between his own secrets and Qingpin's. Chapter 126. It had been a full day of ups and downs. He had entered the game to be interviewed, discussed the strategy for the hidden dungeon with light-shaking realm, discharged from the hospital, and accidentally unlocked a super cheat. He had to work hard to transfer the sword essence to the paw. In short, even someone as strong as Guhan felt exhausted after a day. Taking a bath was a good way to relieve fatigue. Guhan's new house had its own 15-square-meter bathtub. As long as he turned on the faucet, the 45-degree hot spring water would automatically fill the bathtub. This way, Guhan could enjoy the fun of taking a hot spring bath at home. Soaking in the slightly hot spring, Guhan's fatigue began to fade. He emptied his mind and stopped thinking about the sword essence, the sword wielder, Yuan Ku, and hatred. He simply enjoyed this wonderful time in the bath. In the living room next to the bathroom, Qingpin was still making a ruckus. After showing a rare serious expression, she returned to her carefree state and grabbed Guhan's neck to ask for compensation. Fortunately, when Maiyun came back in time and stuffed Qingpin's chattering mouth with a piece of delicious dongpa pork. "Have I already spent half of the 200,000 yuan I earned today?" Guhan, who said he didn't want to do chores, couldn't help but worry about his wallet. He didn't know how long the 100,000 yuan he gave to Wen Maiyun could last. With the terrible appetite of the poor, it would be very difficult for them to even last 10 days. "I still don't have enough money. How did I end up with such a glutton?" Guhan let out a long sigh. Even when he was so poor that he couldn't even open a pot and could only rely on nutrient solutions to survive, he never let out a sigh. In the end, how many times had he let out a long sigh when he thought that the unlucky Qingpin was cute? "Master, can Maiyun come in?" When Maiyun's question suddenly came from outside the bathtub. Through the glass door of the bathtub, he could see a graceful figure. "What are you doing in here?" Guhan was stunned. He had taken so many baths, but this was the first time someone planned to come in. "Master, Maiyun will serve you in the bath." When Maiyun's words made Guhan's heart tremble. That's right, as a maid, it was every maid's duty to serve their master while he bathed. It was something that every maid had to do, and it had to be done well. Could a maid who couldn't serve her master comfortably still be a qualified maid? That's right, this was a popular benefit chapter. As an excellent novel with high morality, longevity, and high prestige, how could it not have these popular benefit chapters? Otherwise, how could the author be worthy of the eager and expectant gazes of the readers? In most cases, the hypocritical male protagonists with despicable morals would righteously reject the maid's request to serve and bathe them, displaying the image of a pure and innocent young man. And the maids would first be moved by the righteous male protagonist, then forcibly enter the bathroom and serve the protagonist. All of this was done willingly by the maids. It was caused by the evil class system, and had nothing to do with the pure and kind male protagonist. It's a pity that our frozen cold is destined to take an unusual path. "Come in." Guhan didn't refuse hypocritically. He didn't even hesitate and directly called Wen Maiyun in. Thus, Wen Maiyun, who was blushing, slowly walked in, regretting in her heart that she had offered to serve Guhan in the bath. It was obvious that Guhan didn't know he had this obligation at all. "Has Qingpin finished eating?" As soon as Wen Maiyun came in, Guhan didn't ask anything else and rushed to ask about Qingpin's situation first. "The poor lady has finished her meal and is now looking at shuck and better," Wen Maiyun replied in a soft voice. "Oh, very good. Close the bathroom door tightly and remember to lock it from the inside. Don't let Qingpin come in." Guhan instructed like this. As if afraid that Wen Maiyun would think too much, he added, "Let's not disturb Qingpin watching cartoons." "Are you afraid that my voice will be too loud and disturb Lady Qingpin watching cartoons?" Wen Maiyun secretly complained in her heart, but didn't dare to disobey Guhan's orders. She obediently closed the bathroom door and even locked it from the inside. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take off your clothes." Seeing that when Mayun had locked the door, Guhan threw out such a sentence. When Mayun's body trembled a little. Her fingers were placed on the zipper of her clothes, but she didn't move for a long time. "Hurry up," Ji Han impatiently urged. When Mayun finally accepted her fate and obediently pulled down the zipper, she then took off her maid uniform and threw it on the ground. When Mayun actually only wore a maid outfit on the outside. Inside, she was directly wearing underwear, panties, and suspenders. However, when Mayun did not wear some hollowed-out lace, or simply transparent and small mature women's seductive underwear, but like a girl, she wore pure cotton underwear that was as white as snow. Even the suspenders she wore were pure white. From this, it could be seen that when Mayun was actually a very conservative mature woman. Fortunately, there was a rule that maids must wear suspenders. Otherwise, this rare touch of sexy element would not appear on when Mayun's body. "Come in. Help me scrub my back." Guhan didn't ask when Mayun to take off the rest of her clothes. Instead, he asked her directly into the bathroom to scrub his back. When Mayun breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. Her steps were light, and a pair of slender and plump legs stepped into the bath in front of Guhan's eyes. This beautiful leg was so attractive that even if any man saw this scene, he couldn't help but have some thoughts of floating in the air. We don't know if Guhan had such thoughts, because his lower body was completely immersed in the water. As soon as when Mayun entered the bath, she quickly sat in the bath, leaving only the body above the chest exposed to the water. She clearly knew which part of her body would make men have an uncontrollable desire. It was better to hide these parts. She picked up Guhan's towel on the edge of the bath, dipped it in water, and began to wipe it on Guhan's bare back. When Mayun noticed that Guhan's back muscles were very developed. Usually, it seemed to be no different from an ordinary boy. However, the moment she touched it, she would be able to feel the astonishing power hidden beneath his skin. In addition, when Mayun also noticed that there was a huge wound on Guhan's back that extended from his neck all the way to his waist. When Mayun knew that this should be a knife wound, because her husband, Long My-er, also had a similar knife wound on his body. However, Long My-er's wound was on his stomach. When Mayun looked at the knife wound in a daze, she couldn't help but stretch out her hand, wanting to touch the wound. Looking at the wound, she felt as though she was looking at Long My-er. "Don't touch it." Feeling when Mayun's hand movements, Guhan, who was lying on the edge of the bath, immediately berated, scaring when Mayun out of her world. She hurriedly started to scrub his back again. "You're curious about this knife wound?" When Mayun's technique was exceedingly superb, causing Guhan's entire body to feel as light as a feather, causing his thoughts to return back to that time 12 years ago. This was left behind by a Jedi Knight. Although their lightsabers are called swords, and look like swords, they're completely made using knife techniques. Furthermore, even their knife techniques are unbearably crude. When I was 8 years old, I was already able to use sword techniques to beat them up. It's a pity that when I was 6 years old, I was still left with such a sword wound. What a joke. When Mayun did not say anything, as she didn't know what to say. Should she flatter and praise her master for being awesome? When Mayun continued to silently scrub his back. After scrubbing his back a dozen times, she started to shift her attention to Guhan's neck, arms, and thighs. These were the parts that an outstanding maid would have to take good care of. After when Mayun finished scrubbing Guhan's neck and arms, she moved on to his thighs. However, at this moment, when Mayun hesitated, if she were to scrub his thighs, it would mean that she would definitely touch that part of Guhan's body. When Mayun did not want to touch that part. Splash. When Mayun was still in a dilemma, but Guhan suddenly turned over, and the water splashed all over when Mayun's body. The cotton bra that was originally dry became wet in an instant. I don't know if any of you have seen the scene of a cotton bra getting wet, and then becoming somewhat transparent and sticking to the flesh. I have to say, this is a very beautiful scene. However, unfortunately, in order to not touch that warning line, the author could only skim over it. "Master, do you need Mayun to scrub the front?" seeing Guhan suddenly turn over, when Mayun thought that Guhan wanted her to scrub the front. Guhan nodded, and when Mayun couldn't refuse. She could only start from Guhan's strong abdomen and start to scrub. When she was on Guhan's back, when Mayun could still avoid certain parts. However, once she was on the front, even if that part was submerged in water, when Mayun could still see it clearly. However, the strange thing was that in the face of such an alluring scene, that part did not change at all. It did not even have the slightest thought of raising its head. The expression on Guhan's face also became stranger and stranger. It was as if he had seen some kind of hilarious performance, or met with a happy event of 5 million falling from the sky, but he was holding his mouth, not daring to laugh out loud. Almost in an instant, Guhan's personal terminal was flooded with such news. Respected sword wielder Guhan, someone in the game has read the paid post that your small account, Military Governor 12580, posted on the forum. I am Military Governor, I will personally explain how to get an SSS rating. After paying 5 renminbi and deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 4 renminbi has been automatically transferred into your personal account. Respected sword wielder Guhan, someone in the game has read the paid post that your small account, Military Governor 12580, posted on the forum. I am Military Governor, I will personally explain how to get an SSS rating. After paying 5 renminbi and deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 4 renminbi has been automatically transferred into your personal account. Respected sword wielder Guhan, someone in the game has read the paid post that your small account, Military Governor 12580, posted on the forum. I am Military Governor, I will personally explain how to get an SSS rating. I think it's very good and have tipped you 1,888 renminbi. After deducting 20% of the personal income tax, 1,510 renminbi. 4 has been automatically transferred into your personal account. Respected sword wielder Guhan, due to receiving too many similar messages, the system has automatically turned on the Do Not Disturb mode for you. You can click on this message to understand the accumulated messages. Chapter 127. This world was too crazy. 10 minutes ago, Guhan was still worrying about Ching Pin's food expenses. Now, Guhan was fretting over the various notifications. Logically speaking, Guhan was rich. Guhan was rich. In just 10 minutes, Guhan received more than 10,000 notifications. That's right, more than 10,000 similar notifications. They all told Guhan that someone spent 5 renminbi to read his guide post. These 10,000 notifications meant that the final income of 40,000 renminbi had been transferred to Guhan's personal account. However, this was only a small portion. It wasn't enough to make Guhan rich. What really made Guhan rich was the less than 1,000 tips. The lowest tip was 10 renminbi and the highest was 10 renminbi. Guhan scanned through the tips and realized that most of them were in the 100 renminbi range. There were quite a few tips that were as high as 588-1888. The highest tip that Guhan saw was from a game ID called Soul Eater. This guy tipped Guhan 500,000 renminbi in one go. That's right, 500,000 renminbi. Guhan took a deep breath, then clicked on his account and checked his account balance. The total amount of 1.2 million almost blinded Guhan's eyes. What exactly happened? Why did my post suddenly explode? Actually, Guhan guessed that it was because of the Invincible Swordsman interview. As expected, when Guhan opened the official website of Invincible Swordsman, his interview video filled the entire homepage. Looking at it, all the other links had been removed. Looking at the number of viewers of this interview, it had actually exceeded 200,000. Is the subscription ratio only 20? This is going to be a flop. Guhan smiled as he thought of a joke from 1,000 years ago. He then entered the game forum and was shocked to find that the top vote on the front page of the forum was his guide. He clicked on it and saw that the number of replies had already exceeded 100,000. Furthermore, it was increasing at a rate of 4,000 to 5,000 replies per minute. It was increasing at an insane rate. For example, OP is so handsome. The OP is too awesome. OP, please accept my knee. OP, Please post the Easter egg walkthrough for the Wudang Peak dungeon. I'll give you 1,888 renminbi as a reward. Comments like this were everywhere. When he logged into his Smurf account, he was greeted by thousands of friend requests. Guhan ignored the requests and closed the website. He wondered if he should write another post like the military governor reveals the secret of the Wudang sect's top dungeon. After thinking for a long time, Guhan felt that it was better not to exhaust the goose that laid the golden eggs. He had to take it slow. Now that everyone had tipped him with their spare money, he would definitely not earn much if he posted an Easter egg post. It would be better to wait for a month or two, when everyone's wallets were fuller, before releasing a new strategy. Since he couldn't post a new strategy post, Guhan thought for a while and used the military governor 12580 account to post a post titled "Thank you, everyone, my post." Then, there was only one sentence. "Thank you everyone for your support. Please give your recommendation tickets, monthly tickets, and tips to a guy called Stormy Billows, who wrote the great novel Sword Maiden." This guy hasn't eaten for a month. It was already the third day when Guhan entered the game again. Before this, Guhan had spent all his energy reading and researching the history of King Arthur's defection and the various dungeon videos provided by Yaoguang. If it wasn't for the fact that today was the agreed day to collect the restored King Yu from Gongsun-ji, Guhan would probably have to research for a few more days. There was simply too little historical information about King Arthur. Guhan even went to Yuzhong City's library and stayed there for 2 days. As some of the information was stored in the library, it was not uploaded to the internet. It should be mentioned that the popularity of Guhan's post had gradually decreased. He only received a few 100,000 yuan a day, unlike the first day. At 23:59 that day, Guhan received a total of 6.48 million yuan. He paid off all the hospital's debts. After Guhan entered the game, he immediately contacted Gongsun-ji. However, Gongsun-ji stuttered. After a long time, he finally admitted to Guhan that the restoration of the King Yu's sword had run into trouble. Gongsun-ji's personal workshop was his sword grave. The sword grave was unique to every player in the game. It was a house that existed in a dimensional space. It was the thatched hut that Guhan was assigned to when he entered the game. As long as he invested money, he could gradually upgrade his sword grave from a thatched hut to a 1-bedroom, 1 living room, 3-bedroom, 2 living room, villas, buildings, gardens, and villas. To enter his own sword grave, he only needed to think about it. To enter someone else's sword grave, he needed to go to the Quantum Transmission Center in Yuzhong City, enter the serial number of the sword grave he wanted to enter, and get permission from the owner. Ji Yu-han keyed in Gongsun-ji's sword catacomb number into the Quantum Transmission Center and waited for almost 10 minutes. When Ji Yu-han almost thought that Gongsun-ji had absconded with his sword lady, she finally received Gongsun-ji's permission to enter the sword catacomb. Gongsun-ji's sword grave was already at the level of a villa. Other than a small building, the rest of the space was occupied by Gongsun-ji's forging room. When he entered the forging room, he saw a huge electric furnace the size of a shipping container. That's right, it was an electric furnace. It was a famous electric furnace produced by the Zeppelin high-frequency electronic furnace factory in Berlin Base City. It was a new generation of high-tech products that used black fuel and was electronically controlled. The sky blue coating was full of sci-fi colors. With one press of the button, the temperature instantly rose to 6,000 degrees. The amazing German electric furnace was worth at least tens of millions. Guhan roughly understood why Gongsun-ji was so poor. Is there a problem? It looks like it's already repaired. Guhan walked to the side of the electric furnace. Through the 3 layers of insulating glass, he could clearly see that the Yu King's sword was floating in the electric furnace. The various scars and cracks on its body had all disappeared. It looked no different from a normal Yu King with full durability. It only looks like it. Gongsun-ji shook his head. Do you see? There's still a crack about 1 centimeter long on the hilt. It hasn't healed. I can't see it. Ji Yu-han answered honestly. Through the glass, he saw a crack that was less than 1 centimeter on a sword 10 meters away. Ji Yu-han knew that he did not have such eyesight. I can see it. Gong Sun Ji's eyesight wasn't as good as Guhan's, but the will of a swordsmith could magically merge with the electric furnace. He could use his mind to observe the condition of the sword lady in the furnace. It's been 3 hours. This crack has been smelted for 3 hours, but it still can't melt any further. It's still there. Then, what does this crack mean? Guhan asked. It means that the Yu King's Gojian sword's durability is stuck at 99%, and it's been stuck for 3 hours without any progress. At this rate, even if it's smelted for another 300 hours, there won't be any change. Gong Sun Ji also had a pained expression. Why is it like this? Guhan's face turned green. He had to go to the dungeon with Yaoguang's people tomorrow. How could he wait for 300 hours? I don't know either. I've already done all the steps perfectly. Gong Sun Ji sighed. I don't care. You're a swordsmith. I've already handed my sword lady to you. You must think of a way to repair the Yu King by today. Otherwise, you can return my deposit to me, and according to the rules, I'll compensate you 10 times the amount. Guhan was also very anxious, but he didn't know anything about swordsmithing, so he could only threaten Gong Sun Ji. When Gong Sun Ji heard that Guhan wanted him to pay 10 times the amount, he almost vomited blood. He already owed a lot of money. Where would he find the money to pay Guhan? As the saying goes, the wheel of fortune turns. Guhan was still in debt a few days ago, but now he could ask someone else to pay him back in the blink of an eye. I don't have any other way. Gong Sun Ji scratched his messy hair and said unwillingly, but that old guy should have a way. If it really doesn't work, I'll have to ask him, but he's asking for a very high price. I don't have the money to pay him. Who's this old guy you're talking about? Guhan immediately answered, I'll pay for it. As long as the Yu King is repaired, I'll pay for it. What a pain in the ass. Gong Sun Ji dialed the number with a bitter expression. Hello, Dad, it's me. You're my son. Okay, I was wrong, I'm your son. Your son is in some trouble, and the client has already asked me to pay 10 times the amount. Yes, pay. The client is willing to pay, not make you work for free. It turned out that the old guy Gong Sun Ji was talking about was his own father. The old guy arrived very quickly. In less than 2 minutes, he appeared in Gong Sun Ji's sword catacomb. Brat, you haven't contacted your father for half a year. You're really something. Don't come to me for help if you can. As soon as he arrived at Guhan Ji's sword catacomb, the old guy hugged Guhan passionately and taunted him loudly. Sir, you don't know, but this brat isn't skilled enough. I've scolded him so many times, but he refuses to learn. It's a complete waste of time for you to give him the business. How about this? Let's sign a contract and become strategic partners. In the future, I'll give you a 9% discount. Gong Sun Ji's father was also a jerk. As soon as they met, he immediately tried to steal his own son. Gong Sun Yu, if you say one more word, I'll kick you out immediately. Gong Sun Ji couldn't take it anymore and exploded. TCH. Gong Sun Yu shrugged and walked in front of the electric stove. He asked disdainfully, what's the problem that you, your detestable father, have to deal with it? Gong Sun Ji explained the situation of the Yu King to Gong Sun Yu with a cold expression. Gong Sun Yu's eyes lit up as he listened. He walked around the electric stove a few times and slapped his head. I understand. Chapter 128. As for what Gong Sun Yu understood, he did not say. However, he circled around Ji Yu Han a few times and sized him up from head to toe for a long time. Suddenly, he said, Customer, the damage to the Yu King's Gojian sword should not be as simple as you said. It was only damaged by the dragon flames, right? Let me make a bold guess. I'm afraid that not only did your King Yu lose 99% of its durability, even the sword mark between the two of you has been destroyed to the point where it seems to have no substance at all. The reason why King Yu hasn't been able to repair it yet is because of your sword mark. When Gong Sun Yu spoke, he had the air of a scheming and unfathomable charlatan. Gong Sun Yu was completely unaware that he was already a million miles away from the truth. What sword mark being destroyed to the point where Guhan and King Yu didn't even have sword marks, okay? King Yu was a sword maiden that Guhan had grafted onto when Kunzu's fleeting year calendar was about to synchronize. This method was good in every way and didn't have any side effects. However, the biggest flaw was that there was no sword mark in the sword wielder's body. I actually forgot that I don't have King Yu's sword mark in my body. Guhan blamed himself. He actually forgot that he didn't have King Yu's sword mark in his body. However, the strange thing was that Guhan had all the functions related to the sword mark. For example, the sword mark sound transmission, forceful command, forceful sword return, and other abilities to command and communicate with the sword maiden. Guhan didn't lack any of them and could do all of them. Thus, Guhan had always ignored the existence of the sword mark and felt that it didn't have much of an effect. Only when he repaired King Yu today did he realize that the sword mark had become the biggest obstacle to King Yu's recovery. How is it, customer? Did I guess correctly? It was a pity that Gongsun Yu didn't have a white beard. Otherwise, he would be the best candidate to play the role of an old Daoist priest. Master Gongsun is very perceptive. Military governor, I admire you. Respect. Although Gongsun Yu's guess was wrong, he had actually guessed the crux of the problem. To a certain extent, damaged sword marks and no sword marks were the same thing. Therefore, Guhan simply took the opportunity to admit that Gongsun Yu had guessed correctly. Then, he asked the next question: since Master Gongsun knows the cause of the problem, I wonder if you can repair King Yu and let her recover? Of course. Gongsun Yu's words made Guhan's heart lighten. It was good that it could be repaired. However, Gongsun Yu's tone changed. However, there is still a problem. What problem? Guhan's heart tightened. Could it be that repairing King Yu still required some rare materials? Of course it's about you lying to my idiot son. Gongsun Yu said angrily, how dare you hide the important news of the sword mark's damage from my son? I think you're a villain with ulterior motives. Guhan was speechless. In the blink of an eye, he had become a villain with ulterior motives. However, thinking about it, Guhan did hide such important information from Gongsun Ji. However, Guhan did not hide it on purpose. He truly did not know that the sword mark would become such a serious obstacle during the repair process. Old man, what are you saying? Don't insult my guess. Gongsun Ji yelled at his father unhappily. This is my business. I don't need a stinking old man like you to butt in. Shut up. You wastrel, idiot. You're a disgrace to the Gongsun family. Gongsun Yu knocked Gongsun Ji's head without any hesitation. You idiot. Do you know how much damage this will cause to the Gongsun family? If we can't even repair a mere famed sword lady, won't our Gongsun clan's reputation in the world of swordsmiths be ruined? TSK, hasn't the Gongsun family's reputation been ruined in the hands of an old man like you? Gongsun Ji retorted. This time, it was Gongsun Yu's turn to be speechless. He snorted for a while, then ignored Gongsun Ji. He turned to Guhan and said, Guest, we won't do this business anymore. Also, you deliberately hid the damage and broke the rules of the swordsmithing world. Just you wait for the arbitration. You stinking brat, throw that sword out and return it to this evil guess. Things suddenly took a turn for the worse. Gongsun Yu was about to throw Guhan's King of Yu out of the furnace. Once it came out of the furnace, all the previous repairs would be in vain. Even if Guhan went to another shop, he would not be able to get the Go-Gen sword in perfect condition the next day. Fine, I admit defeat this time. Guhan shook his head and grabbed Gongsun Yu's shoulder. Stinking old man, you just want money. Tell me, how much do you want? I don't want to waste time with you. Guhan was rich now. He had a few million yuan in his bank account. He was a completely different person from the frugal Guhan from 2 days ago. What? You dare to call me a stinking old man? This is disrespect to the senior swordsmiths. I'm going to complain to the arbitration. 100,000 RMB. Do you think 100,000 RMB is enough to get rid of us? Open your eyes and see. Our Gongsun family is not the kind of family that will bow down for 5 buckets of rice. 200,000. Our Gongsun family has a long history and is a swordsmithing family that has lasted for 500 years. Do you think a mere 200,000 RMB can humiliate our pride? 500,000. Look, my son, Gongsun Ji, is a famed swordmaster, And I, Gongsun Yu, am a 1 in a million spiritual sword grandmaster. A master swordsmith and a grandmaster swordsmith are working for you. Don't you think you're looking down on them with 500,000? 100. Guhan shouted. This is the most I can offer. If you ask for more, I'll go to the Peerless Sword Shop. Even the prices there aren't as high as yours. Okay, deal. It's settled. Gongsun Yu clapped his hands and laughed. See that, stinking brat? Old Ginger is spicier. You worked so hard for 3 days and only earned 30,000 RMB. Your father just said one word and you earned 1 million. Don't you want half? No, 70% of it to your dear father. Gongsun Yu, you idiot. Dementia. Gongsun Ji's face was red with shame as he cursed. You're the idiot, a middle-aged man with dementia. I won't even give you a share of the 1 million. Gongsun Yu hugged Guhan's shoulder and pretended to be close. Come, rich man. 1 million, transfer it to me. Okay, please keep it. Guhan smiled and transferred the money over. Almost a second later, Gongsun Yu received the notification of the money transfer. Gongsun Yu opened his account proudly. When he saw the balance, his expression changed and he pushed Guhan away. You stinking brat, are you messing with me? No, I didn't. Guhan said coldly. Then why only 100 RMB? To prove that he was telling the truth, Gongsun Yu projected his account transfer record in the air. It clearly stated that 100 RMB was transferred from the military governor's account to Gongsun Yu's account. Seeing this, Gongsun Ji felt deeply ashamed of his father. He covered his eyes in pain and squatted on the ground. That's right, this much. Guhan smiled evilly. That's right, 100 RMB, not a cent more, not a cent less. Are you an idiot? We agreed on 1 million. Gongsun Yu was so anxious that his eyes turned red. Oh, maybe Senior Gongsun is old and your hearing is not good. Maybe you overheard the word million and mistook 100 RMB for 1 million. Guhan smiled evilly again. Do you want me to play the recording for you to recall? Guhan thought and Guhan and Gongsun Yu's conversation replayed in his mind. 100,000 RMB. Do you think 100,000 RMB is enough to get rid of us? Open your eyes and see. Our Gongsun family is not the kind of family that will bow down for 5 buckets of rice. 200,000. Our Gongsun family has a long history. We are a family of swordsmiths that has lasted for 500 years. Do you think a mere 200,000 RMB can humiliate our pride? 500,000. Ahem, look, my son Gongsun Ji is a master swordsmith, and Gongsun Yu is a 1 in a million spiritual sword grandmaster swordsmith. A master swordsmith and a grandmaster swordsmith are working for you. Don't you think 500,000 RMB is too low? 100. Okay, deal. It's settled then. The evidence was conclusive and irrefutable. Guhan had indeed said 100 RMB. Oh right, I have already sent this recording to BAT for notarization. This is already a legally binding contract. If you violate the contract, we will see it in the arbitration. I am a jungler. Gongsun Yu slumped to the ground. Things were not going according to his script. 100 RMB is not even enough to pay for the materials. Old man, what method do you have to fix Yu Wangjian? Hurry up and fix it for Mr. Military Governor. Gongsun Ji walked to his father and helped him up. Are you stupid? 100 RMB is not even enough to buy a piece of 100 refinement iron. Fix it for him. Gongsun Yu said weakly. Look at this. Gongsun Ji shook his head and projected the day's news into the air. Honorable Sword Forger Gongsun Ji, you have received a remittance of 100,000 yuan. Please check it. Gongsun Yu, who was in a daze, suddenly heard a heavenly voice in his ears. This is the deposit. As long as Yu Wangjian fixes it, there will be another 100,000 renminbi transferred to you. Guhan patted Gongsun Yu's shoulder. How you split it is your son's business. Chapter 129. Brat, what's the highest temperature your German stove can reach? Gongsun Yu, who had recovered his energy, stood in front of Guhan Ji's stove. Just now, Gu Hanji had promised to give him half of the 200,000 renminbi, which was 100,000 renminbi. Therefore, Gong Sun Yu immediately regained his fighting spirit and started to help Gu Han repair the Yu King sword. The upper limit is 16,000 degrees, but if you turn off the safety settings, it can be raised to 18,000 degrees. Gong Sun Ji answered honestly. Then raise it to 18,000 degrees. Gong Sun Yu gave the order without hesitation. Although Gong Sun Ji didn't like his father, he didn't doubt his father's order at all. He turned off all the safety measures and raised the temperature to 18,000 degrees, along with the warning that the furnace might explode if it went over 16,000 degrees. According to the order and weight I told you before, throw all the ingredients into the furnace. To repair the Yu King sword, Gong Sun Yu prepared another batch of expensive materials. Gu Han saw that there were more than 3 types of materials on the list that were priced at 20,000 renminbi per gram. This batch of materials would probably cost around 100,000 renminbi. When Gong Sun Ji put all the materials into the stove according to the order and raised the temperature to 18,000 degrees, the small crack on the Yu King sword finally began to heal. The originally 1 centimeter crack gradually shrank to 8 millimeters, 6 millimeters, 4 millimeters, 2 millimeters, 1 millimeter. However, when the crack shrank to 1 millimeter, it stopped healing. It froze at 1 millimeter for an hour without any change. Old man, did you use the wrong recipe? Gong Sun Ji could not help but question the situation. Shut up, why did I give birth to a stupid son like you? Gong Sun Yu's words made Gong Sun Ji choke. The Yu King sword was damaged along with the sword mark. If we don't repair the sword mark, even if the crack shrank to 1 millimeter, or 1 nanometer, it will still exist. But old man, according to what you said, the sword mark is not in the Yu King sword. Even if the Yu King cultivates for the rest of his life, he won't be able to repair the sword mark. Gong Sun Ji said hesitantly. Yes, so we have to find a way to repair the sword scar. Although Gong Sun Yu was talking to Gong Sun Ji, his eyes were fixed on Gu Han. Logically speaking, King Yu's sword mark should be inside Gu Han's body. What do you need me to do? Gu Han sensed Gong Sun Yu's intention and asked in a deep voice. I don't know if Mr. Military Governor has heard of the legends of Mo Xie and Gan Jiang sword. Gong Sun Yu suddenly asked a somewhat off-topic question. I know. Gu Han nodded. Legend has it that during the spring and autumn period, when the Middle Ages and ancient times were connected, there was a famous swordsmith, Gan Jiang. He was as famous as the god of craftsmanship, Oyu Jizi. The king of Chu ordered Gan Jiang to forge a pair of swords using all sorts of rare treasures. However, these materials could not be melted even after 3 years. The king of Chu felt that Gan Jiang had deceived him and planned to kill Gan Jiang. In desperation, Gan Jiang's wife, also a swordsmith master, Mo Xie, jumped into the swordsmithing furnace and used her own body to melt all the rare treasures. Only then did she forge 2 unparalleled spiritual swords, Gan Jiang and Mo Xie. According to the records, these 2 swords are rare spirit sword maidens that were forged by humans. Haha, so Mr. Military Governor is so knowledgeable. Then don't you know that today's incident with the king of Chu is similar to Gan Jiang and Mo Xie 4,000 years ago? Old thing, what do you mean by this? My Gong Sun clan's swordsmithing path is upright and upright, the path of a sage on the inside and a king on the outside. How can we walk such a crooked path and harm the lives of others? Hearing Gong Sun Yu's words, Gong Sun Ji's expression suddenly changed. This Gong Sun Yu actually wanted to use such an evil method. Stinking brat, what upright and upright? It's all a lie to idiots like you. Which famous sword, spiritual sword, or immortal sword doesn't come with blood? Gong Sun Yu's face was full of disdain. Mr. Military Governor, that's all I have to say. Whether this king of Chu sword succeeds or not depends on your own opinion. After all, the sword mark is in your body. Gong Sun Yu's so-called method was for Gu Han to learn from Mo Xie 4,000 years ago and jump into the furnace, using his own body and the sword mark to smelt the king of Chu sword. Who asked the sword mark to be in Gu Han's body? Gu Han hesitated. It wasn't that he was afraid of death. After all, this was a game, and he wasn't in a dungeon. If he died, he would immediately revive. What Guhan was hesitating about was that he didn't have any sword mark in his body. If he jumped in, it would probably be useless. However, this was probably the only way to save the King of Chu's sword. Guhan stood in place, not moving. "Oh right, Mr. Military Governor, I have to remind you of something. If you decide to jump in, please stab the King of Chu's sword into your mind palace before you die. Although the temperature inside is as high as 18,000 degrees, you should be able to live for about 5 seconds. You'll be able to experience the closest feeling to hell in this world. Then may I ask, Mr. Military Governor, have you made up your mind?" "I've made up my mind. Open the furnace." TSK, I didn't expect someone to be willing to jump in. Although there's no need to be afraid of death in the game, the 5 seconds of hell are like that. Gong Sun Yu clicked his tongue in praise when he saw Ji Yu Han jump down from the top of the furnace without any hesitation. As for Gong Sun Ji, this was the first time he had seen someone die for the sword. He stared at the scene inside the furnace through the glass. The moment Guhan fell into the furnace, he pounced at the King of Chu's sword floating in the furnace. In the blink of an eye, the King of Chu's sword stabbed into Guhan's body. Then, all of Guhan's hair turned into sparks. His skin quickly dehydrated and fell off. His muscles could dissolve, and his fat almost instantly melted into oil before vaporizing. In just 5 seconds, all the organic matter on Ji Yu Han's body had been vaporized, leaving only a pile of bones that were still being burned. In a few more minutes, these bones would also be completely cremated, turning into a pile of powder. However, Gong Sun Ji and Gong Sun Yu couldn't see the scene of the bones turning to dust. After all, this was a game. After Guhan died, his corpse turned into sparks of light and disappeared from the game. What a joke! What a joke! Who would have thought that the idiot would actually fall for a method I came up with? He actually jumped down. Gong Sun Yu burst into laughter when he saw Guhan die. He laughed so hard that tears were coming out of his eyes. "Old thing, you're saying that you came up with this method?" Gong Sun Ji asked in disbelief. "Of course. Which book in the Gong Sun clan has recorded this evil method of sacrificing oneself for the sword?" Gong Sun Yu harumphed coldly. "This idiot, how dare he trick me with a word game? Did he really think that I, Gong Sun Yu, would throw away my principles for 200,000 renminbi? Letting him die once in the game is really letting him off easy. You bastard." Gong Sun Ji punched himself in the chest. "How am I going to explain this to the military governor when he comes back? That's your problem. After all, you're the one who accepted the order, you're the one who bought the materials, and you're the one who repaired the sword yourself. My idiot son, I'm just giving you a suggestion. It has nothing to do with me. F***CK. The viewers could more or less understand why the relationship between Gong Sun Ji and Gong Sun Yu was so messed up. With a father like this, no one would be able to get along well. Ding dong. At that moment, the electric furnace suddenly chimed. Gong Sun Ji was all too familiar with this sound. The furnace would only make such a sound when the sword Maiden was completely repaired. When the furnace made such a sound, it meant that the King of Yu had completely repaired it. What the hell? Gong Sun Ji and Gong Sun Yu looked at each other. They were starting to get confused. The fire in the cauldron gradually subsided, and King Yu was automatically sent out. Ignoring the scorching heat from the sword, Gong Sun Ji and Gong Sun Yu each picked up a magnifying glass and examined the sword. As expected, the cracks on the sword had completely disappeared. The King of Yu's Gojian sword was completely repaired. Old thing, did you really come up with this sword sacrifice technique? Gong Sun Ji couldn't believe his eyes. His worldview had been refreshed a few times today. If I told you that I didn't come up with this, would you believe me? Gong Sun Yu was just as surprised as Gong Sun Ji. Just as they were about to study it in detail, Gong Sun Ji's communicator rang. Mr. Military Governor is back. He's knocking on the door. When Gong Sun Ji said this, he felt very ashamed. Although it seemed like he had accidentally fixed King Yu, when he thought about how it was just a trap his father had dug, he felt a sense of shame from the bottom of his heart. Let him in. At least we can still earn another 100,000. Gong Sun Yu didn't feel ashamed at all. He smiled and patted his son's shoulder like a brother. "Hey, we had a deal. The remaining 100,000 is mine." Whether it was Gongsun Ji, Gongsun Yu, or Guhan who came in later, none of them noticed that the words King of Yu's Gojian sword were even less pronounced than the King of Yu's. Chapter 130. Sword Maiden Online, Xianyang City Ruins, Parking Lot P4 outside the Xianyang Airport's checkpoint. It was said that during the apocalypse, over 1,000 cars had been parked in this parking lot. However, after over 1,000 years of evolution, only the skeletons of these cars remained. If one were to touch these skeletons that were originally made of steel, they would shatter into powder like biscuits. In the game, very few people would come to this place. This was because there were no regional bosses, no rare materials, and no dimensional crystal mines. A few months ago, this place was a barren wasteland. It was rare for thousands of people to come here in a year. But last month, the peace here was broken. A group of players began to set up camp here, set up a stronghold, set up a teleportation portal, built a wall, and set up dozens of hidden observation points around the camp, monitoring the entire area within a radius of tens of kilometers around the camp. The ruins vaguely gave off the feeling of a small town. The reason for this was naturally because this was the entrance to the hidden dungeon. Yaoguang Sword Sect, Nine State Sword Sect, and Heng Mountain Sword Sect had all completed the unlocked chain quests. They began to set up camp here, set up supply points, and continued to attack the hidden dungeon. This place was not like most online games, where there was no melodramatic war between sects for the sake of snatching the entrance to the hidden dungeon. That was because the entire human world strictly forbade sword bearers from fighting each other for the sake of benefits. Even if the game included a sect PK system, if anyone dared to start a war between sects for the sake of benefits, once it was announced, all humans and players would despise these sects that took the initiative to provoke them. This was proven by historical facts. A few years after the game's launch, two of the most powerful sects at that time started a war for the ownership of the green silk sword. In the end, the cause of the war, the source of the war, and the videos were all published in detail. The sword bearers who had originally joined these two sword sects began to withdraw in large numbers. The two great sects, which originally had over 1 million members, had less than 10,000 people left in just a week. They had completely fallen into disuse and became a joke after a meal. If there was any irrepressible hatred between the two sword-bearers, they would have to report it to the council. If the hatred between the two parties wasn't triggered by illegal reasons, the council would arrange for a duel between the two parties on the premise that there would be no deaths or injuries, or simply based on the number of yuan worms of the same level that one party had killed within a certain period of time. Generally speaking, in the face of Yuan Ku's threat, humans were very decisive in suppressing all conflicts between humans, at least on the surface, and appeared to be very united. As for the crafty plots in the dark, only the heavens knew. Even though Yaoguang Sword Faction, Nine Provinces Sword Faction, and Heng Mountain Sword Faction were fighting each other to the death for the honor of being the first to clear the hidden instance dungeon, they were still able to work together in harmony and peace. In the Xianyang Airport camp, in the meeting room of the Yaoguang Sword Sect's encampment, two players had already arrived and were sitting in their seats. The tent appeared to be an ordinary tent that was only a few square meters in size. However, when they walked inside, they saw a rather luxuriously decorated meeting room with all sorts of equipment. The meeting room was over 100 square meters in size. It was a spatial tent created using dimensional technology. The two players who arrived earlier were famed sword-bearers belonging to Yaoguang Sword Faction. One of them was a man and the other was a woman. The woman's face was delicate and seductive. Her smile was sweet and she gave off the air of a prostitute. As for the male sword-bearer, he was a bald man with muscles all over his body. He looked very valiant. "Hongyu, did you hear? Yesterday, that Planet Watcher guy went back. The sect master gave him special permission not to get involved in this mess anymore. I really envy him. Don't waste time here," the bald man grumbled in dissatisfaction. "What is there to envy? Now that Planet Watcher is gone, it means he's done with the quest rewards. The sect master has promised us that all the non-sect props we get from the instance dungeon will belong to us, the female swordbearer said disapprovingly. That's if we can clear that D*mend instance dungeon. It's been 15 times already. I've had enough of it. There's nothing worse than repeating the same instance dungeon every day. Then why didn't you request to quit from the sect master? Why did you let Planet Watcher get ahead of you? The female swordbearer said with a smile. Did Planet Watcher request to leave on his own accord? That's because the 4 of them are useless. The sect master purposely asked him to leave. The person who replied was not the bald man, but another swordbearer who was dressed like a scholar. However, he had a very imposing aura. It was obvious that only someone who had been in a high position for a long time could develop such an aura. Behind the scholar were 2 other people, a man and a woman. However, the 2 of them looked very similar. Although they were of different genders, they looked like the same person. They were a pair of twin swordbearers. All right, everyone is here. Let's start the meeting. Shusheng naturally sat on the main seat. It seemed like he was the leader of this small team. Then, the pair of siblings sat on the left side of Shusheng, while the other 2 sat on the right side of him. What meeting is there? Without 6 people, we can't even enter the instance dungeon, the baldy muttered under his breath. The scholar glared fiercely at him, and the baldy immediately shut his mouth. Last night, the sect master and I chatted offline for the whole night. Today, I have a few things to announce. The relationship between the scholar and Yaoguang seemed to be very close. Otherwise, they would be so close that they would talk offline. The others also knew that the scholar and Yaoguang knew each other in real life. Therefore, they were not curious about the face-to-face conversation. First, Planet Watcher has been expelled from our pioneering team due to some inactive comments. Second, there will be a new member joining us. This is a powerful helper. Our sect master spent a lot of money to hire him. None of you are allowed to neglect him. New member. Who? Who would be stupid enough to come here? Wildflowers. Foxes. Tadpoles. These people are not as useful as Planet Watcher, the bald man could not help but say. Other than those few, who else? All the elite swordsmen in the sect are here. There is no one else. The female swordsman who was sitting with the bald man shook her head. That's not necessarily true. Our boss can still ask for help. I think Boss Yaoguang can invite that military governor who has been so popular recently, the younger twin sister said with a weird smile. Yes. It would be great if Boss could invite big sister Mingyu back from back then. The older twin brother also added. Are you done? The scholar slammed the table. Do you want me to chat with you alone? No. The 4 of them said at the same time, rejecting the chance to chat with the scholar alone. The third thing is that the 4 explorers who were here previously, except for our group, will all withdraw. That is to say, from now on, we will be the only group fighting here in the Alcade Sword Sec. What? Everyone was in an uproar again. For them, this was something unacceptable. The 4 teams were gradually falling behind 9 provinces and Mount Heng, who had caught up later. What was the point of retreating 3 more teams and leaving only one of them? They could just give the first place to someone else. Fourth. The scholar ignored the uproar and continued, from today onwards, I will step down from my position as the team commander. The new member will be the team commander. After saying this, the scholar stood up from the main seat and walked to the bald man's side. He sat down on the spot where Planet Watcher was. Great, the team was in an uproar. Why? Why can a new member take the position of commander? I, Steel Centipede, will be the first to disagree. That's right. Magic Pen is doing well. If not for him, we won't even reach 60%. He is just a new member. Why? Forget it. Chapter 131. During this period of time, the commander's name was like thunder piercing the ears. On the forums, Tiebar, and QQ groups, everyone was discussing the commander's strategy for the King of Yu Gojian Jian Jian instance dungeon. They also called Jiyu Han's strategy for throwing a coin, closing his eyes, and flying straight to the third mission, Hand of God, the world's #1 strategy. Especially when the new players entered the game and followed this strategy, they successfully increased the S-rank clearance rate from less than 1% to 16%. All kinds of free glory fell on Guhan's head. Guhan naturally became the #1 internet celebrity in recent times. There was even Guhan's personal Tiebar, personal fan group, and fan Weibo. It was said that the number of followers of the military governor's personal 8-city alliance support group had exceeded 100,000 people. It was a cause for celebration. Of course, as the game experts, the few members of the Yaoguang Sword Sect's pioneer group did not take military governor seriously. Their expressions were still vaguely filled with provocation. It was only because Ming Yu was there that no one dared to do anything. This is the famous commander, and also a good friend of Big Sis, my good brother. I won't talk nonsense with you about his abilities. If you don't know, you can go online and check it out. You don't even need to search for keywords. He is the #1 trending topic. Ming Yu first introduced Guhan in a domineering manner. Hello. Guhan nodded and showed his name. He did not say anything else. Military governor, let me introduce you. Although these guys are useless except for Magic Pen, they are the absolute elites of Yaoguang. In the game, they are the top experts. Then, Ming Yu introduced all 5 of them in detail. Ming Yu first introduced the former team leader, a sword wielder who looked like a scholar. His full name was Splendid Magic Pen Lansang Jiang. Because the name was a little long, people were used to calling him Magic Pen. As soon as Magic Pen entered the game, he stayed with Yaoguang. He was one of the founding elders of Yaoguang Sword Sect. Wondrous Brush had the nickname Wondrous Brush Scholar in the Alcade Sword Sect. He was known as the #1 strategist of the Alcade Sword Sect. Many of the famous battles and activities of the Alcade Sword Sect, as well as development plans, were all carried out under Wondrous Brush's guidance. In the Alcade Sword Sect, in terms of prestige, the first would naturally be the sect leader Alcade. The second would probably be Bright Moon, but the third would definitely be Miaobi. In this hidden dungeon, Magic Pen acted as the commander and strategist of the 4 teams. In the process of clearing the dungeon, they discovered countless tricks and solved many difficult problems. If not for Magic Pen, it would have been a question whether the Alcade Sword faction would have been able to clear the dungeon to 60% completion rate. However, for the threshold of 60%, Magic Pen had been delayed for more than half a month and still couldn't figure out where to attack. Therefore, in the face of Yaoguang's suggestion to change the commander, although Magic Pen was somewhat disgusted, he did not object. Magic Pen was not only resourceful, but his strength was also extraordinary. According to Ming Yu, Magic Pen's sword element had broken through the threshold of 100,000 quarks sword spirit sword wielder 5 years ago, and now it had reached more than 300,000 quarks. However, Magic Pen had tried almost all the spirit sword level tokens that he could find, but he still couldn't find a spirit sword level sword lady that could synchronize with him, so he had been stuck at the famous sword level. This was not a rare thing. Countless famous sword level sword bearers were like Magic Pen, stuck at this level. There was no lack of old sword bearers whose sword element had broken through 500,000 quarks and had been stuck at the famous sword level for a lifetime. Although Magic Pen Lansang Jiang couldn't get the favor of the spirit sword level sword lady, his famous sword lady was very amazing. It was the famous sword level ranked 15th in the famous sword record, the innate sword lady shadow-bearing sword, which was ranked a few ranks higher than the Yu King Gojian sword. Be it in terms of intelligence or strength, he was fully deserving of being the strongest among the 5. Magic Pen Lansang Jiang, innate sword lady shadow-bearing sword, grade 1, sword element 320,000 quarks, ranked 21st in the list of famous swords, virtual list. Ming Yu next introduced the bald strong sword bearer. He looked mighty and majestic, with an extraordinary body shape. His name was also very fitting, called Steel Melon Meat Bullet, or Steel Melon for short. Using Ming Yu's words to describe Steel Melon, he was a scoundrel, reckless, easily angered, and calculative. However, he was very loyal to his brothers and friends, and kept his promises. Once, in order to help his friend obtain a famous sword token, he had cleared the same instance more than 300 times, for a full half a year. Steel Melon had a mixed reputation in the Yaoguang sword faction. He had many friends, but he also had many enemies who disliked him. However, in terms of strength, whether it was his enemies or friends, they all had to admit that this burly man's strength was quite extraordinary. The sword element in his body had also broken through the limit of the spirit sword level, reaching 120,000 quarks. In the Yaoguang sword faction, he was a top-notch expert. It should be specially pointed out that Steel Melon's famous sword-level sword lady was not a sword lady from the Huaxia sword manual, but from the Europa sword manual. Its name was Arondit, and it was the sword of Lancelot, one of the legendary 12 Knights of the Round Table. It was ranked 93rd in the list of famous swords. Steel Melon Meat Bullet, Innate Sword Lady Arondit, Grade 1, Sword Element 120,000 quarks, ranked 193rd in the list of famous swords, virtual list. The female sword wielder who had been waiting with Steel Melon in the meeting room at the beginning was called Hong Yu. She looked like an ordinary sword wielder with an average appearance, a normal figure, and a somewhat gentle and intellectual temperament. However, she was, in fact, an expert whose strength was second only to Magic Pen. According to Ming Yu's private introduction back then, Hong Yu was a rare player who had entered the game over the age of 25. However, although she was 7 years later than most people, the speed at which her strength improved was very shocking. In 3 months, she had become a treasured sword, in half a year, and in 2 years, she had crossed the threshold of a spirit sword. This year, Hong Yu had just turned 30, but her sword element had already reached 150,000 quarks. Hong Yu was also very famous in the game world. The battle that made her famous was during the opening battle of the Yaoguang sword faction. She had single-handedly held back 10 Flood Dragon level Yuan Ku, and then, with the first Madame Gongsuan's sword dance, she had killed all 10 Flood Dragon level Yuan Ku. That's right, Hong Yu and Guhan were both sword masters with outstanding strength. Hong Yu liked Yaoguang very much, and it was because she wanted to pursue Yaoguang that she had joined the Yaoguang sword faction. This was no secret among the disciples of the entire sword faction. It was said that Hong Yu had confessed to Yaoguang more than 50 times, but Yaoguang had rejected her every time. Hong Yu was not stupid. If this time didn't work, she would try again. It was said that Hong Yu had once said that even if Yaoguang got married and had children, she would be the third wheel. What was interesting was that Hong Yu's famous swordswoman was the same as her in-game name. She was also called Hong Yu. She was the legendary first Madame Gongsun, the grandmaster of sword dance in Du Fu's famous poem, watching first Madame Gongsuan's disciple sword dance. She was ranked 81st on the famous swords record. Hong Yu, born swordswoman. Hong Yu, first grade. Sword essence, 150,000 quarks. Ranked 56th on the famous swords virtual ranking. Finally, there was the pair of twin siblings. The older brother was called Yu Sikong, and the younger sister was called Yu Siyu. They were born less than 2 minutes apart. Yu Sikong and Yu Siyu had a telepathic connection since they were young. Their hearts were connected, and they flew together. That's right, they flew together. Legend had it that the twin siblings had decided to abandon the prejudice of the world in real life and be together bravely. Both of them had reached 100 quarks of innate sword essence at the same time. They entered the game at the same time and became ancient, treasured, and famous swords at the same time. Even their growth rate was the same 80,040 quarks of sword essence. Their swordswomen were very rare. Only twins could successfully synchronize and coordinate their swords, dual sword. Sword pairs were very rare and difficult to synchronize and coordinate. Because they were a pair, 2 swordswomen were needed to synchronize and coordinate their swords successfully. However, a pair of swords was actually a sword, and they could only be used when their hearts were in sync. Normally, 2 people could not synchronize their hearts and minds. Only natural twins could achieve this by relying on their innate advantages. Only twins could synchronize and coordinate their swords. As the strongest pair of swords among the famous swords, dual swords were divided into male and female swords. The female sword was called Yang, and it was wielded by Yu Sikong. The male sword was called Yu Siyu, and it was wielded by Yu Siyu. When the 2 of them fought alone, their strength was only above average among the famous swords. However, once the two swords worked together, their combat strength would shoot straight to the peak of the famous swords. They could be said to be invincible under the famous swords. Yu Sikong, born swordswoman, dual swords, Yang, grade 1, sword essence 80,000 quarks, ranked 971 on the list of famous swords, virtual ranking. Yu Siyu, born swordswoman, dual swords, Yang, grade 1, sword essence 80,000 quarks, ranked 972 on the list of famous swords, virtual ranking. Yu Siyu, born swordswoman, dual swords, Yang, grade 1, sword essence 80,000 quarks, ranked 972 on the list of famous swords, virtual ranking. After listening to Ming Yu's introduction, Guhan said that it was still a little stressful for Guhan to lead such a pair of powerful teammates. Yes, it would be more troublesome to subdue them. In fact, Guhan felt that it was not how strong the teammates were, but how obedient they were. Chapter 132. In the City of Two Moons, a certain player was fighting the boss Yuan Ku with his party members. Suddenly, a message reached the player's ears. Then, the player's mind wandered and his sword maidens lost their commander. Then, they were beaten up by the boss. "Hey, Passerby A, are you crazy? What are you thinking?" Passerby A's party member immediately shouted at Passerby A military governor. That military governor. Passerby A was very excited. That military governor has joined our Yaoguang sword faction. What? The players in the same party were all shocked by this news. Then, the artificial sword maidens who had lost their commander were all stunned. This party that could have defeated the boss was instantly wiped out. This scene happened in different places at the same time. This was because all the players in the Yaoguang sword faction received a notification at the same time. The star player, military governor, had joined the Yaoguang sword faction. This news instantly spread from the mouths of the members of the Yaoguang sword faction to the other players. Then, it quickly swept through the entire forum. The Yaoguang sword faction instantly gained a new sense of existence in the eyes of all the players. Their reputation rose by quite a bit. Even if they did not get the first clear in the end, it was still worth it for the Yaoguang sword faction to spend so much money to invite Guhan. At the same time, the news of military governor joining the Yaoguang sword faction also reached the ears of the various sword sects. As an important piece of information, it was handed over to the sect leaders of the various sword sects. Most of the sect leaders did not care about this news. He was just an ancient sword-tier swordsman, an internet celebrity with a short shelf life. Perhaps his ability to clear dungeons was outstanding, but that was all there was to it. It was not worth paying attention to. However, the Nine-State Sword faction and the Hung Mountain Sword faction were very concerned about this. As they were also in the King Arthur's Betrayal dungeon, they naturally knew what it meant for the military governor to join the Yaoguang sword faction. The sect masters of the two sword sects passed down orders to the raid squads under them to speed up the instance dungeon. At the same time, they ordered them to scout out the situation at Yaoguang sword sect's campsite. A few minutes later, they received news that Yaoguang sword sect had withdrawn 3 of their raid squads. Only the strongest raid squad was left, and it had entered the instance dungeon 3 minutes ago. System notification. Player military governor, welcome to King Arthur's Betrayal instance dungeon. Quest objective. Find the imprisoned King Arthur and bring him back to Yangjing Base City. System announcement. Main quest has been updated. Quest 1. Search the battlefield. Your team has discovered a high-energy reaction nearby. It seems to be a battle between Yuan Ku and the Swordbearer. Please find and arrive at the quest location within 10 minutes. If the quest is not completed within 10 minutes, the instance dungeon will fail. System notification. Special prompt. If you encounter any wandering Yuan Ku, please kill them immediately. Otherwise, they will issue a warning and attract all the Yuan Ku in the entire stronghold to attack you. Mr. Military Governor, do you have any instructions for us? The Steel Melon Bullet asked as soon as they entered the instance dungeon. It was obvious that he wanted to pick a fight with Guhan. Back then, when Ming Yu was not by his side, the Steel Melon Bullet had not been polite to Guhan. Not at all. Guhan wanted to shake his head. I have already said it before. This time's command is still Magic Pen. You guys will continue to carry out the raid in your original way. This time, I will only be a spectator and participant. Before entering the instance dungeon, Guhan had made an agreement with Magic Pen and the others. This was the first time they entered the instance dungeon. Guhan would not be giving any commands. The authority to give commands would still belong to Magic Pen. The reason for this was that Guhan had many considerations. The most important point was that Guhan needed to personally confirm some things that might have been overlooked before. TSK. I thought you had some ability, but it turns out that you are just a piece of trash who can't even fart. Uncle Steel Melon can send your small body flying with a single slash. Steel Melon, shut up. If you say another word of nonsense, I will kick you out of the instance dungeon. Magic Pen's ruthless words made Steel Melon shut his mouth. After lecturing Steel Melon, Magic Pen walked to Guhan's side. Mr. Military Governor, I don't know what you are up to, but since you said that you will listen to my commands, from now on, you are my chess piece. Do you understand? Yes. Guhan nodded and did not say another word. This time, he was indeed planning to be an obedient spectator and chess piece throughout the entire process. Very good. Now, everyone choose the famous sword grade sword lady's sword scar. Hold the sword lady in your hand and move quickly in the sword master stance. Magic Pen gave the first command. Choosing the famous sword grade sword lady's sword master stance meant that the physical attributes of the famous sword grade sword lady would be 100% enhanced to the sword wielder. This way, the sword wielder would be able to move quickly with the speed of the famous sword grade sword lady. Generally speaking, the famous sword grade sword lady could maintain a constant speed of 60 km per hour while moving. Everyone, follow me to the north. Full speed ahead at parking lot P2. Same rules, do not enter terminal T3. Once Magic Pen gave the command, everyone, including Guhan, sped toward parking lot P2. Guhan's current position was at the entrance of parking lot P4 of Xianyang Airport. Parking lot P2 was to the north, and the two parking lots were separated by terminal T3. Exploring the King Arthur's Betrayal instance dungeon was a very difficult process. The difficulty of exploring the instance dungeon was one of the highest among all the hidden instance dungeons in the past 200 years. For this mission alone, Yao Guang's team failed 5 times before they finally completed it. According to the information given by Yao Guang, Magic Pen and the others could not find the location of the battlefield no matter how hard they tried. This was because Xianyang Airport was very big. Even with the physical attributes of a famous sword grade sword lady, it would take around 5 minutes to run from their original location to the battlefield. What was more annoying was that Xianyang Airport was a medium-sized stronghold of the Martyr's Palace. There were many Yuan Ku monsters wandering around. During the process of searching, if they were entangled by those Yuan Ku, they would have to waste a lot of time to eliminate those Yuan Ku. That battlefield only lasted for 10 minutes. If they were late by even a second, the entire instance dungeon would be declared a failure. In the end, it was Magic Pen who came up with a solution. He had many loyal but not very strong players form a party to enter the instance dungeon. Then, before entering the instance dungeon, each player was assigned a search area. After entering the instance dungeon, the players all split up to search. If they encountered Yuan Ku, they were not allowed to attack Yuan Ku. Even if they were killed, they were allowed to let Yuan Ku attack them. They only needed to reach their own area as fast as possible and complete the search. With such a desperate search method, after sacrificing more than 40 players for 3 days, they finally found the location of the battlefield. It was in the northwest corner of parking lot P2. The reason why they were not allowed to enter terminal T3 was because there were quite a number of Yuan Ku there. If they were entangled with them, they would waste a lot of time. Hong Yu, who was at the front of the team and acting as a scout, warned, "Captain, Yuan Ku has been spotted ahead. There are 2 targets. Both are Soul-class Yuan Ku Shaolin Temple's Dharma Institute disciples. Sikong, Siyu, I'll give you 10 seconds to get rid of these 2 Yuan Ku. The rest of you, maintain your current speed and move forward. He had to kill every Yuan Shen he encountered along the way. Otherwise, just like the system notification had said, he would attract a large number of Yuan Shen that he couldn't kill all of. Yes. Yu Sikong and Yu Siyu looked at each other and sped up. Their speed suddenly increased to 80 kilometers per hour. They quickly ran to the front of the team and attacked the 2 Yuan Ku Shaolin Temple disciples. At the same time, the twin swords in the hands of the Yu siblings, the female sword and the male sword, also turned into specks of starlight, materializing into the form of a sword maiden. The pair of sisters, who were not tall but looked very cute, charged toward the 2 pitiful Shaolin disciples. They were a pair of sisters. One had dragon horns on her head and wore a golden dress. The other had wings on her back and was dressed in a red feather dress. The sword mothers of these twin swords were the same as the cicada swords. They were both very rare demon sword mothers. No one knew which one was the older sister and which one was the younger sister. The 2 soul-class Shaolin Temple disciples each used a golden rod. Their eyes were bloodshot. Clearly, they had lost their human intelligence. When they saw the twin swords charging toward them, they did not even consider the difference between their soul-class and famed swords. They swung the long rods in their hands and attacked. Yuan Ku name, Shaolin Temple's Dharma Institute disciple. Level, Soul Class. 2-dimensional world, Eastern Wuxia. Instance dungeon, Martyr's Palace. Health, 4 stars. Attack, 2 stars. Agility, 2 stars. Demonic power, none. Abilities, a pair of golden rods. This is their only ability to defeat their enemies. It is also their best ability. Ultimate skills, Chi Mai Staff Technique, Coiling Dragon Staff Technique, Shailin's 18 Bronze Men Formation. Introduction. The core soldiers of the Martyr's Palace come from the Shaolin Temple of the Eastern Wuxia world. They have received careful guidance from the head of the Shaolin Temple's Dharma Institute and are proficient in all kinds of staff techniques and formations. Once 18 of them are gathered, they can use the 18 Bronze Men formation to fight against famed swords. Coiling Dragon Staff Technique. The 2 Shaolin Temple disciples used their ultimate skills as soon as they met the twin swords. Unfortunately, it was useless. The twin swords' blades curled around the golden rods and pulled hard. The 2 Shaolin Temple disciples' golden rods were removed by the twin swords. This was the twin swords' basic skill, male and female coil. Consumes 10% of the shield's energy to remove Yuan Ku's weapon and prevent him from picking it up again for 5 seconds. The success rate depends on Yuan Ku's level. Without a weapon, the Shaolin Temple disciples' strength dropped by more than half. Without any suspense, they were killed by the twin swords in less than 8 seconds. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,